Good evening, everyone. I would like to bring Sonoma City regular council meeting to order. Peter, could you please lead us for Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I would like to ask our city clerk, Ms. Barr, for roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Barnett.
Here.
Councilmember Agramonte.
Here?
Councilmember Felder.
Here.
Councilmember Lowe.
Here.
Mayor Dean.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our meeting right now is so-called hybrid meeting. We have the people in-person meeting here, and also it is a Zoom meeting available as well. Today we had closed section meeting for our city council starting from the 5 o'clock. It took the 40 minutes. And no any reportable item to share with everyone. The next, I would like to approve today's agenda. If anything needed to change, it's in order. If none,
I move approval of the agenda.
I second.
roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Barnett.
Aye.
Councilmember Agramonte.
Aye.
Councilmember Felder.
Aye.
Councilmember Lowe.
Aye.
Mayor Dean.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Agenda number 1, comments from the public. At this time, members of the public may comment on any items not appearing on this agenda. Please keep your speak 3 minutes or less. Thank you.
Pat Polverenti from Sonoma. I appreciate this opportunity to speak before the City Council during public comment and share some thoughts with you and the community. In the interest of transparency, I suggest that the city publish more press releases informing the citizens of Sonoma about what is happening in regards to public works. Doesn't have to be a long article, just short and to the point. I believe this will result in less angst and griping about what we see happening and not understanding timelines, restraints, and other conditions that delay projects. For example, what is the status on replacing the flashing lights at the pedestrian crossings at Andrew and Broadway and Patton and Broadway? All our community members, young and old, use these crosswalks regularly, especially to access Pete's Coffee and Hot Mug. Number 2, for several weeks, the Plaza duck pond was disgusting. It was filled with mud and silt, and the water wasn't being circulated. The ducks were even having a hard time maneuvering. After viewing this each morning, as I enjoyed my morning coffee on the plaza, the day I intended to go to City Hall to inquire why the duck pond was not being taken care of and who was responsible, I arrived to find a backhoe preparing to clean the pond. What was the reason this beautiful little pond was unattended for such a long time? Third, no notification of several city streets having the on-pavement driving directions repainted. I do regularly read the Press Democrat and the Index Tribune as a means of keeping informed as to what is happening in the city and the county. Let me apologize in advance if there were notifications of these 3 items and I somehow missed them. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Zach Tweedy, Boys Hot Springs. Good evening, City Council, members of City Hall. My name is Zach Tweedy, and while I may not live within the boundaries of the city limits, I am proud to say I live in Sonoma. Tonight, I bring a request for consideration. Internship opportunities for the next generation of leaders here in Sonoma. While I'm sure it seems like a guy my age may just be looking for a job, that's not entirely the case. Inspiring youth to participate in the civil body is paramount to ensuring that the future of Sonoma remains strong. High school and college-age citizens live all around us, yet do not participate fully in the Sonoma city government. The representation is important, but lacking. Internship opportunities in the government provide an outlet for young leaders to more fully engage with the city they live in. Local internships within the city foster a local presence. With Sonoma Valley High School just 3/4 of a mile down the road, a wide pool of applicants is available at the city's fingertips. Recruiting and training young leaders in the day-to-day activity of the city is beneficial to both the city and the intern. To the intern, they develop foundations to their career, acquire new job skills, and branch forth into the future of their own professional development. For the city, they build deeper community ties to families that would be impacted by this outreach. Internship opportunities here can be as diverse as the applicants themselves. Despite being a small city, there is plenty of opportunity for young people to thrive and get involved in a personally meaningful and professionally impactful way. From finance to environmental activism, law to management, the next generation here can begin to take the first steps in civil governments and civil activism. Not lost in a larger system, focused effort can be applied to best develop the skills that are needed for the internship and beyond. In addition to the skills that the intern would develop by working in city government, the relationships and connections that are formed during their tenure here can last a lifetime. These connections act as a springboard for continued interest in the city and career opportunities in city governance and beyond. Relationships are as important as the work itself. Sonoma is interconnected with all of the other leaders in the Greater Bay Area. Having internship opportunities here allow additional connections to be developed with the internships established in Santa Rosa, Roanoke Park, Napa, Vallejo, Sebastopol, San Francisco, and beyond. Building leadership with a view from Sonoma elevates our city and allows us to have a voice in the culture of California. To wrap up and summarize, Sonoma is a small and proud city. The youth who leave here yearn to come back and work in this beautiful environment. Establishing internship opportunities here provide local youth representation, professional development, and highlights the city's historical and cultural roots.
Thank you so much, Zach.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are waiting for the more public comments. It looks like no in this room. Could you check with the Zoom,
Yeah.
please?
We have Claire Salat. Let me bring her in one moment.
All right, thanks.
Good evening. My name is Claire Sola. I'm a resident of Sonoma, and I just want to take a moment to share my appreciation to the City Council for creating the hybrid meetings again. This was an excellent opportunity for those of us who are either out of the area during the council meeting or have other caregiving or other responsibilities that don't allow us to come in person. As well as those of us who are disabled or have issues driving at night. So thank you again, and we very much appreciate the open access.
Thank you, Claire. All right, yeah, thank you so much. Let me close the public comments. Let's go to agenda number 2, meeting dedications.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have, I don't know, would you like to, oh, okay, thanks. So I'd like to dedicate this evening to Donna Miller. Donna, a journey that started nearly 95 years ago, started in North Dakota. She worked here, she was a loyal friend and ally and talented painter and active member of St. Leo's Women's Guild. She is survived by survived by her 7 children, 17 grandchildren, 16 great-grandchildren, and dozens of extended family members. We know she and Earl are sipping gin martinis together by a pool under a lemon tree, sending their love back to us. And this is Donna Miller, who lived here in Sonoma and got a master's degree at Sonoma State. One of the wonderful people that we have here in Sonoma passed away. Also, Roberta Bobby Morovic. Roberta Jane Morovic was born in Sonoma Valley Hospital in 1962, died Sunday, July 10th, 2022. She was a fourth daughter, born of 5 girls to Wilfred and Shirley. Bobby grew up in Sonoma riding her pony, participating in countless parades. She also met her sweetheart, John Morovic, and she had 2 amazing daughters. Ashley was born in May 1988, and Shirley. Being a mom was her favorite job for Bobby. She was also a legal secretary, counseled at-risk youth, finished her career at the Veterans Home in Yountville. Bobby also coached many years for the Sonoma Valley girls softball. I just wanted to dedicate this evening to Bobby Morovic, and she leaves behind her husband and family. Thank you. And also another person, Linda Rawls. Linda, of course, Linda Rawls, Sonoma treasured artist of 2008, passed away peacefully at home on the morning of June 22nd. She was 76 years old. Rawls was an award-winning choir director, costume designer, and performer throughout the Bay Area and in the United Kingdom. The Sonoma City Council acknowledged her achievements in 1999 by a proclamation July 23 to Linda Rawls Day. In 2003, she received the Dean Goodman Choice Award for Outstanding Achievement. I'd like to dedicate this evening to Linda Rawls.
Thank you.
So I have one more.
One more. Yeah.
Yeah, I was saddened to learn of a death of a teacher at Flowery School. I was another teacher at Flowery School, Jim Tonnery. And I just want to share this little remembrance I have of Jim. The first time I walked into his classroom, his 5th grade classroom at Flowery, I saw that he had a lot of snakes in the classroom. And I'm not a big fan of snakes. And I said, God, what are you doing with all these snakes? And he said, well, I grew up in a big family and I wasn't allowed to have any pets or any snakes. And so now that I'm a teacher, I have a lot of them because I'm giving back to the kids all the things that I wish I was able to do in this is the room I wish I had when I was in 5th grade. So he was a wonderful teacher and a friend, and I'd like to dedicate this to Jim.
Thank you. Yeah. You have the one.
I have one more. Amanda Peters, 21, of Sonoma, was tragically taken from our world on July 26th after succumbing to injuries she sustained in a car accident caused by a drunk driver. She was a graduate here of Creekside High School. Amanda was born January 26, 2001 in Santa Rosa to Kirsten and Greg Peters. She loved her Republic of Thrift family. She worked there and her favorite customers. I'd just like to dedicate this to this young girl who loved she was a crazy, fun force to be reckoned with, and that's Amanda Peterson. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Magamonte.
And finally, our City Council would like to dedicate this meeting tonight as well to Sonoma native Les Peterson. He unexpectedly passed away last month at the age of 73. Les was born at Sonoma Valley Hospital, attended Prestwood Elementary, Sonoma Valley High, and then went on to the University of Nevada, Reno. He was the third-generation owner and president of local company Peterson Mechanical, and was remembered as a fun-loving husband and father for his legacy in the HVAC industry and as a tireless friend to our community. Les always found time to work on community projects like the Vintage House, raising money for the new Sonoma Valley Boys and Girls Club, and the planning and developing of our Sonoma Valley Field of Dreams right outside this building. In fact, it was Les who ensured that the large complex of athletic fields had the water and irrigation system that has kept them safe and green for succeeding generations of young athletes. He and Peterson Mechanical donated countless hours to designing and completing the Field of Dreams and overseeing its maintenance. In honor of his contribution to the project, the main ball field is named Peterson Field. Les was also passionate about developing career opportunities in the building trades and led the creation of a metalworking program for high school students. The heavy metal program is finishing up its first summer at Peterson Mechanical, with 13 students learning the art of metalwork as a potential career path. He is survived by his wife Peggy, daughter Carly Miller, son-in-law Scott Miller, son Scott Peterson, daughter-in-law Kimmy Peterson, sister Nedra Peterson, brother Chris Peterson, and 5 grandchildren, Mary, Ellie, Juliet, Eli, and Ethan. Sonoma will always remember our own Les Peterson.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all meeting delegations. Appreciate it. Agenda number 3, presentation. Agenda number 3.1, proclamation honoring Julian Morrison for her contribution and dedication to history of Sonoma Valley. Whereas local filmmaker Julian Morrison created a core of the valley, a feature-length documentary in the film tracing the history of the Sonoma Valley. Over a 3-year period, Julie filmed hundreds of hours interview with the longtime residents and the local historians, scanned over 600 historical images. She wrote, directed, and produced a film working in collaboration with the local historian Robert Pomeli, archivist Sandy Hansen, and the videography and editor, the team Leslie and James Simons. Whereas Julian Morrison has made Core of the Valley freely available for the benefit of the community to schools, museums, and nonprofit groups as a means to foster ongoing educating and awareness of the history of the city and the valley. Whereas Core of the Valley details the Sonoma Valley's evolution through the ages from the arrival of the Native Americans 12,000 years ago to the contributions of and the challenges faced by multi-immigrant groups, Bear Flag Revolt, and the birth of the state of California, and the rise of the modern-day winemaking. Local historian and the longtime residents share the tales of cultural clashes, political maneuverings, and the rise and the fall of Sonoma's fortune. Whereas Core of the Valley is an important cultural asset of the Sonoma Valley, celebrating the valley and its inhabitants, while also educating the community and revealing the previously unknown historical details. The popular film has become an iconic representation of this area, both for the residents and the visitors alike. Now, herefore, I interjecting the mayor of the city of the Sonoma to hear and honor Julian Morrison for her contributions and the dedication to the entire Sonoma Valley. Thank you. Congratulations. I would like to, yeah, we take the picture.
Oh, yay. Picture time?
Thank you so much.
The last time I stood before the city council was approximately 6 years ago. And at that point in time, the movie was just an idea in my head that I had. And one of the first things that I did was really think about the history in the valley and decide to come and petition the city itself to see whether we could form, albeit a very small partnership, but a partnership to help make this film happen. So 6 years ago, almost 6 years ago, the city council issued a grant for $3,000 for the creation of the film. And with that $3,000 grant, that got the ball rolling. And once the city council and the city had made that grant, I then was able to go to the county and say, look at this great project that is taking form. The county issued a grant, and then based on the city and the county grant, I was able to raise sufficient private money to actually complete the film. So I really want to stress how important that $3,000 grant was 6 years ago. And it really was fundamental to the creation of the film. So don't ever underestimate how far $3,000 can go. So fast forward to today, six years later, the film is done. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to see it. It can be streamed online, and it also shows regularly at the Sebastiani Theater. It took 3 years to make. Sandy Hansen here, along with Bob, who's no longer with us, unfortunately. He passed away a year ago. We worked together very closely as a team to put together this film. It took 3 years, and thousands of people in the valley have now seen the film. We took a little bit of a hiatus during COVID, the worst of COVID, but we're back at it now. And next steps is to really focus this next year on really trying to get it out into the community more so. So it is a nonprofit project, and so it's not a money-making venture. So it's freely available to groups in the community. So that's the next step in the evolution of this film. But once again, I'm so honored to receive this proclamation, and I thank you for your part, the city council's part, in helping making it happen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Do you have any comments? No. How about in the public? Do you have any comments? All right, let's move to agenda Number 3.2, proclamation honoring Robert Pomeli for his contributions and the dedication to history of the Sonoma Valley. Whereas for over the 63 years, Robert D. Pomeli lived in, worked, and raised a family in the city of the Sonoma. He arrived in Sonoma in 1958 at the age of 29 to become a partner in the law firm of the Judge A.R. Gristed. He would spend the rest of his life in the Sonoma Valley, where he and his wife Nancy raised their 3 children, Mark, Lori, and Janine. Whereas Bob was an honest lawyer who served the people from all walks of their life, many of whom become the closer friends over the decades of the working together. As a general practice lawyer in a small town, he handled all manners of the family and the business legal needs ranging from contracts, divorce, and estate planning to setting up a business. His law office was located in the historic building carries his name, the Papa Pomeli Building. Whereas Bob was beloved and respected in the local go-to historian who took great pride in amazing and the wealth of the knowledge and the documents, memorabilia, and artifacts about the history of the Sonoma Valley. He freely shared his love of and the knowledge of the valley with all who crossed his threshold. He was most proud of his extensive collections of the thousands historic photos, documentations, artifacts, and known today the Pomeli collection, which, according to his wishes, was donated to the Sonoma Valley Historical Society, where it is a featured resource. Whereas Bob was prolific creator of historic documentation, including the book Pioneer in Sonoma and the dozens of the newspaper and the magazine articles of the history of the valley. Most recently, he was an associate producer of the popular 2019 documentary film Core of the Valley, tracing Sonoma Valley's long history. He was also cherished mentor to many local historians. Whereas Bob was a member of the decades of the Sonoma Valley Historic Society, the Sonoma Valley Chamber of Commerce, and Kiwanis Club of the Sonoma, Plaza, and American Legion, and Masonic Lodge. In 2015, he was named the Chamber of the Champion of his 58 years of the service. Now, therefore, I, the Jack Dean of the City of the Sonoma, do hereby honor Robert Pomeli for his contributions and the dedications to the Sonoma Valley. Here is Nancy couldn't come, but the daughter Rory and Janine is here. Let's.
So for the family, we really want to thank you for doing this. My dad would have been absolutely delighted. My mom is thrilled. She's watching via hybrid meeting, which she also loves, by the way. She's here all the time, and when I come, I'm from Michigan, so I'm Janine Parmalee Andrews, and when I come into Sonoma, she makes me watch the meetings. So I know what's going on still. You know, Dad wrote this book when I was 12. So it's been here a long time, and the cool thing about history is it's still applicable now. But he's done a lot since this, and you've talked about the numerous documents and the articles in the Index Tribune and things like that he's written. And I want to say that, you know, it couldn't have been done without my mom working in the background, okay? She personally typed this book many times to get it right and did the editing, plus all the articles that he's written over the years. And so he gets credit, but she gets an awful lot of credit for being the support behind it and watching three youngsters while he was doing it. You said that he was the go-to historian for Sonoma, and he really was. He did have thousands of stuff, and what you may not realize is his stuff was in boxes and boxes of stuff that no one knew where it was except Dad. So when you went into his office, you would ask him for some historical document, and he could find it, like, within minutes. No one else could. And we couldn't have possibly, the archives couldn't have possibly been used for Julie's film. They couldn't possibly have been used, given to the Historical Society so quickly, had it not actually been for hundreds of hours that Sandy Hansen has put her effort forth to archive, pre-archive his archival stuff. She went through all of his boxes, categorized everything, sorted everything, so that we knew what was there, so that Julie could see what was there, and now the Historical Society has it as well. So I really want to make sure that Sandy Hansen gets a big thank you as well. So, thank you.
I'm Lori Parmalee, Sonoma. I just want to say thank you on behalf of my mother and family. This is a great honor.
I'm Patricia Cullinan, President of the Sonoma Valley Historical Society, and I'd like to support your commendation of Bob Parmalee for his extensive contribution to the understanding of Sonoma history. I would also like to publicly thank Bob and his wife for the donation of Bob's archives to the Sonoma Valley Historical Society. They will provide a resource to many future historians to learn about the importance of Sonoma in the history of our state and nation. It's up to every one of us to understand the history of our local community because it gives us a sense of place in the continuum of history.
Thank you, Patricia. Anybody want to say something? Okay. How about in a Zoom? All right. Thank you again. That is our hometown, Sonoma. Thank you so much, everyone's in the support. Let's move to agenda number 3.3, presentation of the downtown parking management plan, planning and the community service director.
Or me. Thank you, everyone, for your time and energy this evening. We're really excited to talk about our downtown parking study. This effort was kicked off originally in 2016, and so some of the iterations are a little bit confusing. We'll do our best to keep it straight, but had a good effort 2017 and 18. And I'll take a moment to introduce everyone, but that's right about when Maria with State Parks came on board, and David Storer and myself. Though little bit of a hiatus with the pandemic. And in light of parklets and a lot of ongoing issues, it felt like a really good time to dive into this issue. So from a planning perspective, we're trying to look at our downtown parking as a whole and look at problems and solutions at a really big picture level. So we engage W-Trans, and we have Brian Canepa here who has helped us with this effort. And we've been doing ongoing collaboration with state parks, and we have Maria Murray with state parks, who's the district superintendent. So thank you very much for your attendance here tonight. And I'm just going to give a quick introduction and turn it over to Brian. And so the slide just summarizes. So we haven't had an official public draft of either of these documents. We had a draft in May 3rd of 2007 that was commissioned by the Department of Public Works. And currently what the findings that we're presenting are an administrative draft that's dated May 12th, 2022. And it really has more of a planning lens on it. I don't think we need anybody to tell us that we have a downtown parking problem. So we're kind of skipping that point and looking into how can we make this better. And so fortunately we have Brian, and I will turn it over to him for the rest of the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Christina. Good evening, members of City Council. Brian Canepa, happy to be here to talk about parking this evening. And I could go on forever about parking, so I'll try to be as succinct as possible. Next slide, please. So, as Christina mentioned, the first study that W-Trans collaborated with the city on was back in 2017. This was actually before my time. I joined W-Trans in 2019. But you can see kind of the contents of the 2017 draft versus 2022 admin draft. And again, this is very much a work in progress right now. But the basis of this was that back in 2017, during that study, they had actually gone back and actually collected all of the data, talked to people, and surveyed folks. And as Christina said, I think most people here can acknowledge the fact that parking is still tight downtown, even having gone through the pandemic. And so for the purposes of our study here for 2022, we're actually relying on the old data because it actually probably had higher demand figures than what you may count today because of the pandemic and things like that are going on. Slide. And so the original purpose of the old study was essentially threefold. One, to look at current parking demand, to look at future parking demand, and try to figure out and come up with recommendations for the best way to manage that. So how do you downtowns are complex creatures, right? It doesn't function like a mall. And so how do you get all these moving pieces working together? And the survey area then for the study that we're also mimicking for our 2022 study essentially looks at from about the bike path in the north down to Patton Street on the south and 2nd Street on east and west. Most of the parking in the downtown is on street, but there are a couple public lots. You have the Casa Grande lot, which is why we have state parks here. Thank you. As well as the smaller lot B, as we call it. Next slide. And this is just another visualization of that, of purple. I would like to note, though, that although the parking data collection that was conducted really focused on the public facilities, the public off-street lots and the public on-street spaces, this plan is also about trying to better coordinate with private off-street lots as well. Next slide. And so you can see here from the actual numbers themselves that we're dealing with about 180 or so off-street parking spaces, about 660 on-street parking spaces. There is a lot of on-street parking in this area, particularly compared to some downtowns. This is much more reliant on on-street parking than off-street parking, which you might find in some of the peer cities if you look around. Excellent. And so when we went back and looked at all of the data, we looked at the survey responses, we saw what people said, and we said, what are the key findings? What are we coming away with here? And first of all is that, not surprisingly maybe, it's hard to find a parking space on the street, particularly around the plaza. And this might seem patently obvious to everyone here, but it's something we like to come out with up front and also acknowledge the fact about why this happens. Sonoma's not atypical in this respect that you have time-limited parking, and from the anecdotal evidence that we collected, it seems like that parking issue on the street may be exacerbated by employees parking there. and doing what typically most cities will call the 2-hour shuffle, but I guess we'll call the 3-hour shuffle. We're essentially moving the cars every few hours. We know that demand tends to peak on the weekends and sometimes during the evening hours when people are coming and eating and dining. We're well aware of the fact that there's spillover parking problems, and what I mean by spillover is when people cannot find a parking spot, they go into the nearby residential neighborhoods, park in front of people's homes. That passenger pickup and drop-off is key. This happens very frequently in the downtown, but there's not necessarily a lot of space devoted to that. And that the on-street time limits are not really well respected. They're not maybe potentially as enforced as they could be, and I think anecdotally it sounds like people are aware of that. Next slide. So in looking then at the conclusions, recommendations that came out, again, we're kind of, sorry, I'm hopping back and forth, but this is back in the 2017 study here, really revealed, a few key things. One is that during the evenings, it's very high parking demand. People are out at restaurants, people are out at bars, et cetera. But really it occurs on the weekends from Friday to Sunday. You have influx of visitors. And of course, there's some seasonality to this, right? During the summertime, you're going to experience higher peaks than not. But that likely, hopefully, will not change in the future because high parking demand is also a symptom of success. Next slide. So what the 2017 study did, and again, that was only a draft at the time, it didn't get beyond a draft, was looking at specific recommendations at the time. And again, none of that was vetted. It was all draft form. And it looked at a few different things that, frankly, were good ideas at the time, and for whatever reason didn't get followed up on until now. So for example, the need to re-examine enforcement, the need to look at public-private partnerships for private lots. Private parking lots are often underutilized. So how do you create a win-win situation with private lot owners and the public so that everyone makes out? How do you better utilize the Casa Grande lot? And so we've had a chance to meet with Maria and the other folks at California State Parks. We had a fantastic meeting. It was actually a nice big round table where a lot of good ideas were exchanged. And it was really informative, I think, for myself and for city staff to see the priorities of the state parks and how those mesh with the city of Sonoma, and seeing how everyone can kind of, again, best help each other out. So yes, and so next slide. And so the other recommendations that they looked at, again, there were several recommendations. I won't go through all these in great detail because these are from 2017, but looking at time restrictions, talking about, parking permits for residential neighborhoods, maybe even talking about paid parking, like meters or things like this. Again, these were all the ideas that were just kind of thrown on the table in the draft form. Next slide. Oh, sorry. But, there was also ideas thrown about, are there potential new locations to be found for public parking lots? What technologies can we take advantage of? And again, we went back, actually, a lot of these are actually pretty good ideas. They just didn't get followed up on. So I'll kind of move forward again so we can talk about how it applies to the current study. Next. So again, just kind of reiterate this again. We know, looking at the data and just anecdotally, I spend a lot of time here in Sonoma, I just live over the hill in Pengrove, that there's a lot of parking demand here. I grew up in North Bay. I'm very well aware of the success that downtown Sonoma has. And so what we're looking at here is how do we best manage that? And realizing that, yes, there were some bips and bumps during COVID and the pandemic, but we're largely coming out of that, and we're still we're planning for, high parking demand, which is why we're at the point with the admin draft study again. Next slide. And so you might look at this and say, okay, so what's this all about? Why are we doing this? What is parking management? Because that can mean different things to different people. Historically, I would say over the last second half of the 20th century, it sounds so old, but most of the time when cities approached a parking problem, they would say, oh, we don't have enough parking, we just build more. This is what we do. Oftentimes cities would demolish buildings, put up parking lots or parking garages, et cetera. But historically, that never really solved the problem necessarily, because parking demand is very concentrated in some areas, as we all know. Everyone wants to park right around the plaza, and there's only limited space in which you can do that. And so the best way to do that is to look at your incentives, your regulations, and so forth, to how do you best distribute parking demand, using what I would say a better combination of off-street and on-street rules and regulations. Next slide. And so, again, I'm not going to read through all of these things, but we said, what are really the goals and objectives of this plan? What are we trying to shoot for here? So I'll kind of focus on the key ones. One is, creating a plan that treats downtown as what we call a park once district, right? And so in that regards, someone's not going to have to drive their car from one end of the downtown to the other. You want to be able to park once and enjoy yourself. If you're a visitor, for example, or a resident, and you don't want to necessarily be forced out by time limits, things of that sort. I've worked in many, many downtowns, and one of the things I consistently hear from downtown merchants is how much they don't want to chase away patrons who have to go running back to their car to feel like that their time is up. So how do we maximize that? How do we also maximize the resources that we do have? Parking is very expensive. Parking construction, parking maintenance and operations, enforcement, all very expensive stuff. So how do we take advantage of what we currently have on the ground and make the best use of it, regardless of the time of day or day of week? And acknowledging the fact that we're dealing with different user groups here who have potentially slightly different priorities. So employers and employees who are looking for long-term parking. You might have residents who frequent downtown but also live next to downtown who might be concerned about spillover parking effects. And how do visitors perceive it? Many of whom don't live in the North Bay or the Bay Area, period. And how do they view parking and parking downtown? And so we want to come up with a plan that acknowledges this and best distributes people where they need to go. Next slide. So this gets the toolbox of measures that I just was talking to staff earlier. It kind of looks like a Christmas tree. So the red and the green is completely coincidental. But when we looked at the full, what we call the toolbox of measures, we said, gosh, we're going to just take a look at everything and see if it makes sense or not. And we're going to grade each of these measures based on how effective it is at managing parking demand, how much it costs, and how easy it is to implement, right? Some things will take a long time, some things will take a brief time. And you'll notice how these strategies on the screen are divided into kind of two sections. And we did this intentionally, and I'll get to it in a second, but the first section essentially represents the what we call phase 1 strategies. The second section is phase 2. So when you address a parking problem, you normally don't try to throw everything you have at it initially, because you might not need to. And so what we really tried to do and work with city staff on is focusing phase 1 strategies that are relatively easy to implement, hence the red on there, where it gets to level 5, which is good in this case, and preserving a lot of the harder to implement but potentially effective strategies for phase 2. And I'll get into some of these strategies in detail in a second, but you'll see on here that for example, for phase 1 strategies, we deal with things like how do you improve enforcement and wayfinding? How can we have better conversations about Casa Grande and working with the state parks? So these are the sorts of things that are what I guess maybe you would consider more low-hanging fruit that we could try to address up front, or even managing your on-street time restrictions. Next slide. And so here we kind of get into detail here a little bit about what each of these phases are and what they include. So I'll kind of go into detail here because this is kind of the meat of what we're looking at. First is looking at enforcement. As I mentioned earlier, from the previous study, it sounded like, in having talked with city staff, that enforcement is relatively light and people know it. And of course you don't want to develop an enforcement program that's punitive in nature. You don't want to drive people away, but you do want to encourage a certain amount of turnover, and you want to be able to do that as cost effectively as possible. So one of the recommendations looks at what they call LPR, essentially, license plate recognition. And it allows you to be able to see which cars are on the street without having to stop. You literally just drive right by it. If you've been to Santa Rosa, you probably have seen these cars driving around. They have it all over the place. Most larger cities have it. Even smaller cities now do too. My hometown of Mill Valley, I think has it now too. But again, the idea is to encourage turnover. Again, working with California State Parks on the Casa Grande lot, And, we've been batting around different ideas, and Maria's been super helpful in being very upfront and frank about what their priorities are and how those mesh. And I think in the short term, what we're trying to do is figure out a way to increase the amount of spaces in the Casa Grande lot. Is there a way that we can do that that's a benefit, again, for the California State Parks and the downtown as a whole? You have wayfinding signage opportunities, which is relatively small, but it can be helpful, particularly if you have public-private partnerships. More passenger loading zones. So anyone who's ever taken an Uber or a Lyft or any of those other TNCs, or just wants to be dropped off by a friend, what we've found is oftentimes people are getting dropped off everywhere over the downtown, and maybe not necessarily in the most ideal locations. In the last phase one strategy, the one that would probably take, again, probably more thought, has to do with shared parking opportunities. And as you probably are already aware, as you walk around the downtown, you'll see that there are private lots in certain areas that are empty, right next to on-street spaces that are completely full. The business might be closed at that hour, or maybe just not busy, but their parking lot is reserved parking. And it's their right, obviously, to do that. There are more cities now that are actually actively engaging with private property owners to figure out, is there a way we can open those spaces to the public during certain hours? And how can we make that financially advantageous for the private property owner? And so the city succeeds at the same time, and we have an additional, whatever it is, 20, 30, 40, 50 spaces to be able to use. I'm actually currently working with the city of San Rafael right now on this very thing. I have a friend who's a parking manager for the city of Sacramento. He's actually made it, he has literally thousands of spaces now that he's working with where they have shared parking agreements. And so we have good access to actual signed examples of agreements where these things have succeeded. And it would be something that we'd want to explore here. Again, completely voluntary, there's nothing forced about it, but it's something that could be very useful. Next slide. Looking at, and going still to phase one strategies, looking at on-street parking management, about what the hours of operation are for time limits, and evaluating which no parking zones there are to make sure that we're actually squeezing out as many spaces as we can. One of the things that you see in downtown Sonoma that's not atypical is that parking time limits are not enforced on Sundays, which is a little odd in one respect because Sunday tends to be oftentimes one of the most busy days for cities and their economic activity. And you end up getting lots of employees and long-term parkers and parking on street during those times. So we want to be able to address that. We're also now looking at vehicle parking, we're looking at bicycle parking as well, because this is in general also a mobility study. So we've been tasked with looking at locations for bicycle parking downtown. How can we improve access in that way? And even how can we improve access in terms of valet parking for bicycles? Which sounds a little funny to some people who have never done it, but if you've ever actually seen one in operation, it's a pretty amazing thing. You'll see actually potentially hundreds of bicycles in a tight area during special events. And then the last part of it is exploring a parking benefit district, which is if you are going to have permits or pricing or whatever the case happens to be, even whether it be optional, that a parking benefit district keeps those monies local in that particular district. And this can be particularly critical if you want local business buy-in and support, because those monies then go back to improving the downtown and things around it. Next slide. So moving on to the phase two strategies. Again, we've kind of gone through the more low-hanging fruit, even though there was a lot of it, into what could become on the phase two side. And then, again, the number one thing that you could do, not surprisingly, is paid parking, metered on-street parking. And again, this tends to be highly contentious in many communities, and we haven't even broached the subject. Again, this is an admin draft. We just want to lay everything on the table. But it's one of the ways that you can manage parking demand, and it's actually one of the most effective ways to do it. Again, that might not even be necessary if the phase one strategies were successful. But other cities have also manipulated this in different ways. Again, I'm drawing on my experience being from Mill Valley, but as you can see here, the sticker that's on the screen is actually from Mill Valley. It's a resident shopper visitor permit. So if you're a resident of the city, you can buy this permit that's relatively cheap and allows you free parking at all the meters all year long. So there's ways to be able to get this such that you're targeting, for example, out-of-town visitors who are really the ones driving parking demand during peak times. Similarly, you can have permits for residential parking permits in districts to prevent spillover parking. You can also have employee permits to be able to manage employee parking. So again, we're going back to this, looking at all the different user groups and making sure that we're trying to address each of their individual needs. But again, this is really phase 2 strategies that, you know, take more thought and more effort to be able to actually unroll. Next slide. So, where are we going with this? Because again, we're just in the admin draft stage. So step 1 is to keep working with California State Parks about what we can do to help them and help the city of Sonoma potentially expand the parking supply and improve the lot itself. Ultimately, we're going to want to complete this study and present it to Planning Commission, get their thoughts on it, and go through more of the public process here, get recommendations from them, and then bring it back to City Council. So that's why this presentation tonight is really educational in nature, and to let you know that we're obviously in the kind of the preliminary stages. And I believe that's it.
Yeah, I'll just jump in for a second and just make sure I realize as we're talking that some of just to make sure everyone's aware with the Casa Grande parking lot that we're referring to is owned by State Parks. It's located behind the Sonoma Mission Swiss Hotel Cheese Factory. And this State Parks has a different mission than the city of Sonoma. And so we met with State Parks very early on before anything is going public or the admin draft, just to make sure that we're all on the same page and collaborating very early. And Maria's here. Do you want to say a few words about kind of your experience with State Parks and what your lens is? Sorry, putting you on the spot. And just from all of us, thank you so much for your early coordination.
You're welcome. Good evening, council members. Maria Mowry, District Superintendent for the Bay Area District. My office is in Petaluma, and we have the State Historic Park here in Sonoma. We are planning for the 200th anniversary of the Sonoma Mission, and many people in the city are stakeholders in that engagement. But yes, Casa Grande is the parking lot in question. And as many of you are probably aware, California State Parks' mission is to provide for the education, inspiration, for natural and protection for natural and cultural resources, which includes this area. And so part of that mission is to provide access to our visitors that are visiting the mission, the Vallejo home, the barracks, the servants' quarters. So it's a little bit different from the needs of the city, but willing to work collaboratively with you all to find solutions, because we are part of the city, we are your neighbors. And if you have any questions about what this could look like, I'm standing by. Thank you.
I have a question. How are you, Maria?
I'm good. How are you?
For years, I've heard through previous councils, et cetera, that we were trying to negotiate a lease with State Parks, and obviously that has not occurred. Is there any update on that?
So yes, we did have a lease with the city of Sonoma.
Yeah.
And that ended right around 2010, 2012.
Yeah, right.
We have been in discussions with the city managers prior about renewing a lease. But we haven't received any real proposals to that lease. We did discuss it with Christina and staff a couple of weeks ago. We are needing to provide that access to all, and so we really need to look closely at what that lease would look like.
Are you still open to negotiating a lease with the city?
We're open to any proposal. We just want to make sure it works for all people of California.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
Is this about
the
whole report in
Yeah.
general? Yes.
We don't have a copy.
We don't have a copy of it.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just follow up from Maria.
Sure.
The general plan circulation element doesn't actually say the words lease. It talks about working with the state of California to work on the Casa Grande. And in our discussions with Maria and her staff, we've been talking about, well, maybe we don't necessarily need a lease, but an agreement to figure out what kind of improvements we can assist on providing on that property rather than paying just maybe a $30,000, $60,000, $100,000, whatever the dollar is per month for a lease, maybe convert that money into improvements, physical improvements that would benefit the state and also ourselves as far as parking. One of the bullets on the slides for the 2017 talked about a concern at that time that the state would be thinking about doing paid parking. And Maria hasn't said it, but right now today it's free parking. There's signage out there that says as such. So the question is, how can we help their mission, maintain the mission for all Californians to have access there, and also maybe perhaps even help out with improvements that they have for archiving and some other activities they would like to complete as part of their master plan. And so with an eye toward that future, that's where we're kind of looking at, not necessarily focusing specifically on a lease, but looking at some mutual benefits as far as improvements. And as Brian was saying, talking about perhaps doing a seal coat, restriping, increasing the parking number from 142 to maybe 190 or something like that. Trying to see if we can maximize that utility out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks. God, I'm just like shocked. This is on paper. Thank you, Mr. Canepa. I know the staffs have really tried to put this together, and there are two planning commissioners here that understand, far more than I do. And one of the things, I guess, in addition to this, are the tour buses. Crazy, I'm going to say this, but they ruin the picture of the city hall because they're dropping people off all the time. The buses stay there. Even our Sonoma County buses sit there. So it's not really appreciated. You would never see these buses sitting in front of the Alamo. That's all I'm telling you. I've been there. They don't allow them. So that's something that's very important to me as well. All of the information here is really exciting, especially when I see it in black and white. It's very great. It's good. And if I was I better not say a number, but if I was a visitor and lived in San Francisco, Burlingame, they have parking lots interspersed throughout their whole city, and it's just like this city, very popular to visit. Okay, the highest number, I would spend $10, $20 just to park for the day. Came in the morning, did whatever, walked around, shop, maybe have a few drinks, some lunch. I would pay a lot just for the day, just to be here. I can't speak for everyone. There are some people who wouldn't do that, but that's what I'm hoping we actually look at, some kind of recovery in some way for the state as well as the city. This is such a beautiful city, but it's being overrun. I think you sort of shared that. I'm just really open to anything. And, I don't think the land that we have, private land, can't speak for everyone. I cannot see someone giving up their lot for parking, even if they made whatever. But so I don't think that. So all the ideas in phase one were really great. I really appreciated all of them. And Maria, thank you so much for being here. Now I have a face for a person, so I'm really excited about even meeting you. This is an issue that I believe really can be resolved, but it's just that we need to know what each one of us want. So thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Canepa. Thank you.
May I ask a quick question before we, when you were talking about passenger loading zones, I want to say a few years ago, maybe when you were on the council, a previous council put like 3 or 4 parking spaces near the crosswalks around the plaza, and they were designated as sort of Uber-type passenger loading zones. And anecdotally, from my experience, they didn't seem to work because if you're in an Uber, you go just directly to where you want to go, or you're picked up directly from where you call it. And so, can you speak a little more about just that particular recommendation?
I can, actually. It's, the passenger loading zone recommendation is not, I don't want to downplay it, but it's not a critical piece to the pie.
Well, I didn't think so.
Yeah.
I was just, yeah.
It's, But no, but to answer your question, though, you're absolutely right. It's kind of enforcement driven and how much you really need to have it happen, right? There are towns, or not even towns, but I mean, if you go to, I mean, the most strict place you'll see it enforced is an airport, of course, right? They don't allow, Ubers and Lyfts to kind of freely pick up, drop off wherever they want. So it's really comes down to, is the city really, is it a high enough priority that the city wants to invest more time and some time and resources to be able to police it occasionally if they see it as a problem. If it's not, then that's certainly something we can drop. I'm glad, thank you for telling me about the history there. I wasn't aware that it had been piloted before. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of it's a give and take, I would say.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question just with regard to the presentation. Did you, and I apologize, the map is no longer there, so I thought about it after the map went away. But did you look at the veterans parking lot?
The veterans parking lot.
No, it's north of the.
Oh, north of the bike path?
Yes.
Yes, so that wasn't covered in the original study for parking occupancy surveys, for example. I don't know if staff has I mean, I would think that would be something we could consider, but again, I'll defer to staff on that.
It's right up the street.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah, no, it's right, yeah.
Yeah, we have had conversations about that parking lot, and it's definitely on the radar. I think that we're keeping the scope a little bit tighter for now. We've worked with the county previously on that parking lot, and it has its own challenges working with another jurisdiction. Casa Grande, obviously a different jurisdiction, but it's right in the heart, and so just our focus is a little bit closer. The Vets building is a little bit outside of where somebody going to a restaurant is going to want to walk, so we're trying to focus on that immediate downtown area first.
I don't think it's that far, and considering that there's so many things adjacent to that, obviously the farmers market on Fridays is there nearby. You have Depot Park, which is also close. I think it needs to be in the mix. I mean, if we can discuss the Bank of America parking lot, and then certainly we can discuss the Veterans parking lot. And there's a lot of possibility there. They have capacity. So, you're right, it's not nearby, but also there are businesses, up First Street West. Well, here we are, right? So it's not that far.
Okay, yeah, we'll take that into for the next draft. Thank you.
If I can just add to that, Mr. Mayor, the concern I'd have obviously is about the neighborhood unit principle. It's an old thing where people will walk a certain amount of distance to a certain function, whether it's a library, government buildings, or whatever. I do like the idea, though, of maybe having employee parking go there. So that's something, because, again, as Brian was saying, we know what they're doing, we see what they're doing, we know who occupies and populates Lot B, for example. I was there this morning at 8:30. Sure enough, there's one business that parks there exclusively. Anyway, the point being is I think it's a great idea perhaps as an option for
Absolutely, and I think I like that idea because people who work here by and large do drive here. There are some people who do live close enough, but I think that would be great if we could look at that, because that would relieve a lot of parking.
So I also wanted to ask Mr. Canepa, I believe there's a suggestion of a shuttle, an EV shuttle that would take people back and forth to maybe Casa Grande. Because one of the things, of course, the goal to have parking is to keep people from running around the plaza looking for parking. So I don't even know, that may be too far in the future, but I know we do have that availability through the county bus services. In fact, I think I've spoken to our Public Works Director, and our own bus that comes here, 32, they're looking for spaces to charge them here, the EV buses. So I don't know, that's probably an embryonic stage. I love using that word. So that's what's happening with that, but I think a shuttle would be quite helpful.
We can certainly look at that as one of the options. I'll be frank about this too. When it comes to shuttles, they're very expensive oftentimes.
Right.
And so we want to be very careful, and when we employ them, to make sure that we have a critical mass of people who will use it.
Absolutely.
But again, if that does exist, then yeah, it could very well make sense.
Mr. Mayor, if I can add to that too, also in talking with Maria, some of the things or programs that they have are to, in the next couple of years, or maybe even sooner, I think she mentioned that they have plans already afoot for ADA improvements out there at Casa Grande and also for EV stations. So to the degree that we can help with those physical improvements rather than paying towards a lease, those are also some of the things that we're going to explore.
Yeah, and we've done a little bit of research into how much it would actually cost. It is quite expensive. The initial quote we got was about $9,000 a week. But the first step to implementing that would really be likely creating some kind of a funding mechanism. So whether it's created the downtown parking district or, some way to have a purse so we can start funding some of those programs.
I have another
Yes.
question to sort of piggyback off Councilwoman Agramonte's thoughts there. So obviously parking is an issue in the downtown. That's why you're here. But what I hear from residents and what I experience myself is not just the parking, but the traffic. And oftentimes the traffic is a result of the lack of parking. I mean, you see, just in that sort of the streets bordering the plaza, you see someone walk toward a car with a key out, and then someone stops and could wait 2, 3, 4 minutes for that car to leave, and then cars end up back, and it just creates a traffic nightmare. And so parking and traffic is, you're the expert here, but I assume parking and traffic are sort of interlinked. And so an issue I've always had, I feel like the city has always sort of relied on the Casa Grande parking lot as sort of like, this is the savior for our parking issues, the Casa Grande parking lot. But in my view, it's just sort of introducing people into the plaza. And what are your thoughts about potentially, and obviously this would be years down the road and a parking district would have to be created, et cetera, but trying to create more parking south of the plaza. So you're not introducing all of those cars into the plaza and creating more traffic issues. And just from your experience with parking, do you think parking facilities, I guess, again, this is sort of driver behavior, but if you're coming into Sonoma, do people generally just want to get to the destination first and then find parking, or will they be sort of willing to park 2 or 3 blocks before they get there, if that makes any sense?
Sure. Well, there was a lot in that comment, so I'm going to break apart it here a little bit.
Go ahead.
So first, yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, if you look at kind of the geography of downtown Sonoma, you'll see that the Casa Grande lot and the off-street lots in general are not ideally placed, right, for where people are actually coming in and out of downtown. And you are correct that there is a definite link between parking and traffic. I wouldn't say necessarily, though, that is a function of parking supply always, but as parking availability, that everyone is vying for the same spaces, and so they tend to circle in the same areas. So one of the things that we're looking at here, and I don't know, can we go to the last slide? I don't know who's driving it these days. Oh.
The last one, Brian, is the conclusion slide. So is it a different?
Oh, second to last slide. The one with that actually showed the picture. I think you brought. Yeah, that one. No, next one.
That is the last one.
That is the last one. Okay. So David was kind enough to be able to load this photo on here all the way over in Folsom. But you'll see, and the reason why I wanted to bring this up is oftentimes it's really the information, right, that people need to be able to identify where there are empty spaces. And this is one of the things that we're talking a little bit about in terms of wayfinding is how can we direct people towards empty spaces without preventing them essentially from having to circle for parking. I don't know if you're familiar with Donald Shoup. He's a UCLA professor. He's like the king and guru of parking. I highly recommend his books. But, he did some statistical analysis years ago and found that, at least in major cities, almost 1 in 3 cars on the road were looking for parking. So it's significant. I can't say that's necessarily true here. But I think what we'd want to do as part of this study is look at solutions like this to be able to direct motorists to where they need to go, but also, like you said, look at parking resources that are more easy to get to without having to drive into the core of the downtown. But there will be some people who will try to do that. I mean, I'm a plan ahead guy. I'm a planner, so I will look for the parking lot. But a lot of people, for example, my wife, will simply just go straight into the middle of the downtown without thinking. So nothing against her. She's a lovely woman, but I'm saying it's a whole host. She's not watching tonight, so it's okay.
It's recorded.
Yeah.
Could I follow up on that in terms of just the planning thing? That's a fascinating statistic there. When I decide to go somewhere and I have to plan to park, I use an app called, Spot Hero. I use, there's other apps I'm sure, but I use Spot Hero. And did we look at all at something? I mean, in our case, you're not paying at this point. I mean, we haven't broached that subject, but is there an app that we could put free parking on there so people, would look and say, hey, okay, I can park at the Casa Grande, or I can park at Arnold Field, or I can park at the Vets, or whatever, and then they would see it, and then they would know, and they would go there, and it would tell them, it's free, or it's only open these hours, or whatever. I think people are getting more and more used to doing things like that. That might be helpful.
It is. So as part of the technology that we're looking at, it's not just, I know I kind of focused on enforcement for the purposes of this presentation, but we're really looking at everything. And you're right, most of the time when it comes to parking availability technology, I'll call it, is often tied in either with pricing itself, so at meters and things of that sort, or investment in some sort, even if it's free parking, you could have sensors. Oftentimes they'll put little pucks, what they call, in the ground. And it's wireless, it's all wireless, but it allows you to be able to determine which spaces are open, which are not. Again, this represents a level of investment that you have to be willing to make, and maintenance. These things take work over time. And whatever we choose as part of this plan too, we want to be cognizant that because I've seen this play out so many times, that it fits into the character of the community. So, for example, signs like this, I've worked in some towns where people say, that's the best thing since sliced bread. And other people say, an electronic sign in my downtown? No way. And so we want to make sure that whatever we choose here fits into the character for downtown Sonoma.
If I can add to that, and Brian, I saw this one obviously in my hometown, but some of the other options that are out there are the monument-based signs, where they're actually on the ground in the public right-of-way, and certainly with our limited sidewalk space and the like, I don't think something like that internally illuminated would actually look that great. And so that's why I thought this one would be a good example of having it on an existing pole. And certainly, if we were to do wayfinding like this, the question is, where would they be? Which way do you come in from town to access possibly Casa Grande or some of these public-private partnership lots?
Yeah, and one last note on this too is, I believe this, I'm not as familiar with the city's website as I should be, but educating people up front about where parking resources are, whether it be on the city website, whether it be through the Chamber of Commerce or Visitor Bureau or things of that sort, how do you get here, and directing people to where the best parking is. Some people will use those resources and be able to access it beforehand.
I have a question regarding the lease, Casa Grande's lease. How long is the term? The owner, when they renew, or?
As Maria was saying, the last one we're aware of was ended in around 2012, I think. Okay. And obviously with their own master plan, the state may not want to go into a long-term lease, and so that's why we've been perhaps looking at maybe some kind of financial exchanging, if you will.
Yeah. And also, I think being the leasee and out in the city, we should look at how long the lease, the term, and then the longer, and then we feel more comfortable and confident to make an investment to improve, and or if in the long term we can share with the state to, it's the cost of the investment. Yeah.
the cost of the lease itself would be, the question is, will the cost of the lease be better spent in exchange for improvements? And I can't speak for Maria, she's here, we can ask her, but I think the state would take a dim view to a long-term lease because the state of California, again, needs to make sure that the public is able to access that particular property at all times. Is it called Access for All? Was that what
It is called Access for All. So we have an initiative at state parks that we want to provide access for all Californians and all people who are visiting our state parks. Most of the initiatives are building new parks in the Central Valley, providing urban access, kids who are growing up in underserved communities and that kind of thing. And it also applies to our historic parks like Sonoma. As far as leases, we did have a lease. Investments by the lessee, of course, we have concession agreements. And concession agreements, sorry to get really state parky on you, but state concession agreements are for the visitors of the state park. And the conflict here is the parking situation in the city isn't necessarily the state parks issue. And I hate to say it that way, but that's kind of how it works. But like I said, we do want to be good neighbors. Our visitors are the ones who eat in your restaurants. My staff live in your town. I mean, we're neighbors. We want to find a solution that is going to work for all of us. And like I said, we would look at the lease possibility, but we do need to keep, the balance to providing that access for all.
All right.
Mr. Mayor?
And,
I'm sorry, could I ask a question?
sure, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
So I guess I don't understand. This is a historic place, so
Okay.
Yeah, this is a historic town.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
anybody who comes here, although we need to promote that far more.
Yeah.
We do a lot more here, have a lot more here than just wine and good food.
Absolutely. It's a rich culture here.
Yep. So do you feel that that's what you're offering? That there's another value? I mean, besides parking, or is it everything here is historic?
So the way I'm understanding your question is, so as state parks, our land, we're to make that available to all.
Mm-hmm.
And with a lease with the city of Sonoma, if that were the case, we could be limiting our accessibility of the parking lot to our visitors,
I'm sorry?
to our visitors at the state park.
And where is the state, your ground is the state park? That's where, I'm just asking.
That's okay.
So your
So the
ground,
Sonoma Mission, 20 East Spain, so the Sonoma Barracks, the Vallejo Home, the Vallejo Home Field. Yeah, those are, and the Blue Wing Inn. So we own a lot of land in downtown Sonoma.
okay.
Yeah.
I guess I
No, it's
needed-
okay. Yeah, it's
Just needed to be more.
just like anybody else, we have issues with marketing our parks.
Thank you.
Sure.
I totally support your mission and open
you.
to all in California. And also, in my, the idea sometimes take care of the neighbors also is important. Because if you take care of the neighbors and take care of the rest of them.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Yes. And I'm then wondering, I don't know that your state, the budget, or in the 5 years or 10 years.
Right.
Do you have this kind of intention or make what kind of the investment 5 years or 10 years in this way? And out in the city, also when we do our own city budget, and we can consider, and maybe we can work together.
Sure. So we do have a draft Sonoma Historic Park Facilities Management Plan. It includes the Casa Grande parking lot. We have a plan for an archival facility on the gravel lot, which is on the northwest corner of the Casa Grande parking lot, which is kind of where the buses pass through, maybe drop off some visitors, but it's pretty much fenced off at this point. So we do have plans for a building there to house all of our museum quality artifacts in there because the district has a lot of those. And we have talked to the city about some of the connectivity between Depot Park and the bike path through the Casa Grande lot into downtown Sonoma, the square. But yes, we can definitely look and partner together. That's what we do at state parks.
Thank you. Yeah, please consider, because we look at it in the long term, planning
Yes.
long term strategy.
Same here.
Yeah,
Yes.
and also we will wisely use our money. We are ready.
Yes. Yes. And
It's interesting, thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind. It's interesting, obviously, we do market for the city of Sonoma, and that,
yes.
we're, as I said, there are a couple of things that I would love, history and art beyond our focus. So your focus is the history as well, and I think as we have tourists come here, that should play a big part of what you're saying, you're sharing.
Yes, absolutely.
Are you planning to institute paid parking in the Casa Grande?
So we do have a mandate to provide more revenue generation for the department. And this parking lot is one of those lots that is a big lot. There is no parking fee at this point when someone buys a ticket to see the museum or the Vallejo home that goes to paying for the parking. We have considered an $8 a day parking fee because that's what our day use facilities.
Well, you heard what I said.
I know, right? I know. You go into San Francisco and it's $30 a day. You park in downtown Sacramento, it's $25. But I understand the history of the city. Kind of lost my thought there, but
You were thinking, Maria, about maybe within the next 6 months to a year, you were thinking about it, maybe implementing
we're
that?
looking at it, yes. And then David also mentioned, we are working on some ADA projects for improved sidewalks, those kinds of things. And then we are also looking at getting funding from PG&E to provide EV chargers, so electric vehicle chargers, which I'm not sure that Sonoma has any of those, and so it'd be a nice benefit.
Another thing, when you plan and for the future of the Casa Grande, also please consider out in the city we have this kind of the idea, because this is the Plaza and Casa Grande and also Depot Park.
Yes.
These are the three parts we can combine it together as one unit, at least for the visitors, even some out in the local residents. For them, so this is just generally a park for everyone.
Yeah.
And also this is matched with your mission,
I
open to all.
Yes, I can see a lot of opportunities for partnerships between the city and state parks. We're all about open space and protecting the natural and cultural history and history of the area, which, Sonoma Mission, 200 years ago, Vallejo Home. These are things that we want to showcase. And then you guys, of course, have the Bear Flag Monument in the Plaza. We're talking about the history of the United States, right? And we want to protect that and make that available to all for future generations. So, yes, plenty of opportunities for partnership. And yes, the parking lot is definitely on our minds. It's just one of those things where our missions might not meet, but we'll work together.
It's great. Thank you. Any more questions?
Yeah, and Maria, thank you for saying that, but I think you heard and no one said, no, I object to that. We need to push history to the front, you know?
Yeah.
Yes.
And that really is important. We haven't done that well. Everybody knows there's a wonderful history, but they need, history and art have to be at the table. And obviously that includes what you're interested in as well.
Yeah, so, with the Sonoma Mission 200th anniversary, we're looking at, we're not sure what the commemoration, if there will be a commemoration because of the difficult history of the mission. State Parks has an initiative for reimagining the past, which means telling the truth of all histories in an area. And Patricia's here. You know, we partner with them also. We a lot of our buildings, or all of our buildings, are historic structures that are important to the history of Sonoma, and we're always trying to promote that.
That's great.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I can just
Yes,
piggyback
sure.
on the concept of paid parking versus options. And this was more like a Brian question or comment. I think in the 2017 study, did you not mention that if the state was perhaps going to a paid parking, rather than have them do that, we could maybe have the merchants do a validation program as an offset and have that revenue given to the state? Is that something that were we talking about that amongst ourselves, or I saw something about validation in the presentation?
Yeah, I would, to be honest, I can't remember if that was in the study or we talked about it ourselves. I'm sorry, there's too many studies around. But yeah, I mean, there's different ways to cut the cake here in terms of trying to get revenues coming in the door. Again, with merchant validation, you do want to be a little careful. There's some work that goes into it. But I think what we'd want to do is, at the end of the day, look at all of our options. That's what we're tasked with here, is looking at everything and seeing what are the best option for the city.
And to piggyback on that, such that if it were the mind of the state to do paid parking because they need the revenue, then we need to look and investigate, or at least look at the potential impact to our downtown and whether we do it, because then you've got competition for spaces or for pricing.
Exactly, and we did talk, about that in terms of if the state does price their lot, what the impacts are going to be on the downtown. There will be some people who will say, gosh, I'm going to park in that off-street lot no matter what because that's a great deal. But then you're going to have other bargain hunters who will say, nope, I'm going to go looking for free parking. And typically when you price off-street lots and have free on-street parking, your on-street parking becomes that much more of a mess.
Well, yeah. And that was going to be my question, because I mean, anecdotally, and in high school when I worked at the cheese factory, most of the employees on the Plaza park in the Casa Grande parking lot, and they just stay there all day. And so if they're going to have to pay to $10 a day, that's going to have significant impacts on
Local
downtown parking. Which again, that's the right of the state, but we have to be prepared for what comes from that.
Exactly, and I think we're, from my understanding, and Maria, if I'm wrong, but this seems relatively certain to happen. So we, as part of our plan and looking ahead to the future, I think we're trying to anticipate this as an eventuality.
Which makes it all the more important to look at the other parking lots that are north of there for employee parking, as you brought up, Mr. Storr, because employees aren't going to pay $8 a day to park their car, and they shouldn't, so. And plus, they're not there to look at the monuments and so forth, and so it's not really compatible with the goal of the state parks anyway. So, one thing I'll say about paid parking: once you have it, yes, people will maybe drive around, but they'll also know it's there, and they'll always say like, "Well, I know I can pay $8 and I can go there," and they may, it may actually direct them in some way to park there. Is this time for comments?
Yes,
or what
any
is,
more questions? Councilmember Felder, do you have any questions? Oh, all right. So in this way, I would like to open to public. And
Are we going to have more just comments or?
yeah, more comments.
Yeah.
Because this is in a presentation.
Okay.
Isn't it?
I just wanted to say that I know we're talking about parking, so we should talk about parking. But the other side of parking is some sort of transit system. I know the idea of a trolley has been mentioned, or a shuttle. I know that the Chamber of Commerce and the Visitors Bureau, I've met with them on possibly securing some revenue for at least bringing people from the hotels into the downtown. I think that has to be part of the equation. I think if we only focus on parking and we don't focus on alternatives to parking, then we're not really meeting our stated goal as a council, which is our effect on the environment. And if all we're talking about is moving more gas-powered vehicles into the downtown and finding other places to put them, we're not being consistent with the goals that we've established or the goals of the state of California. So I think that part of whatever we plan has to be, how do we, and I saw bicycle parking in there, and you talked about valet bicycle parking. I think that's great. We have to put as many of those elements into the plan, because if we don't plan for other ways to get to the plaza, we'll never, I mean, it's such a great place to come. Everyone come to Sonoma. We'll never have enough parking. And we have to think of alternatives to getting people here. And any plan that we come up with has to have something about that in there. I mean, I'm happy to hear about the electric vehicle charging stations. We need to do more about that in general. I'm glad the state is taking an interest in that. But I really think that we have to look at some alternatives. The other thing is, when people come to the plaza, one of the things they like to do here is go wine tasting. You may have heard of that. It's very popular. And it's sort of would be nice if people could do that and not have to worry about their car, and they could shuttle up and walk around and so forth. I think unlike a lot of other places you visit, I think this is a kind of one and done. You park your car, you spend your day, you walk around, you shop, you do this, you do that. And so the idea of time zones or time limits or whatever, I think is not the Sonoma experience that people want. So anyway, so those are my general comments. I want to see alternatives in there, alternative ways to get to the plaza. Absolutely have to focus on bicycle and other transportations into the plaza, and encourage walking to the plaza. One of the things that I talk about a lot, ad nauseum sort of, is benches. And the reason I do that is you can't encourage people to walk if there's nowhere for them to sit on their way. You have to have a place to sit down halfway, to tie your shoes, or find your phone, or whatever it is that you want to do, or just sit down and have a cup of coffee. And I always bring up the example of the chairs outside of Williams-Sonoma that are used all the time because people want to sit outside. And if we had more of a conducive walking environment and the streets weren't so hot, there's not enough trees on West Napa Street and some of the other streets to be conducive to walking. When streets are shaded and there's benches, people don't mind walking. They don't like to walk if they have to walk in the heat and there's nowhere to sit down. So I want to see encouragement for people to walk. That's mainly the local people, I suppose, or people who are staying at, maybe at hotels or Airbnbs or whatever that are a little bit further away. Alternatives to get to the plaza, including shuttles, and more about bikes, more encouragement for bikes. So I think all of the things in your proposal or your planning are great, but we have to have alternatives in there, because just finding more places for people to drive and park is not. Once you're here, you don't need a car. It's not, maybe you do if you buy something, but I've talked to some of the merchants about it, and they say that the way they like to handle it is that there's like a little alley, or they bring the item out to their car or whatever. So, but we have to think about that as well. How do we deal with merchandise? Because we want people to shop and buy things. So anyway, those are my general comments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That's great. Yes.
I've been silent up till now, but and there's a lot of things to digest here and a lot of ideas. Excuse me, some more practical than others. Sorry. But my question for staff and for our consultant is, do we have a plan for how we are going to implement at least some of these ideas in phase one? Do we have a target or a goal, or are we just talking about planning and like the 2017 study, it's just going to sit there for 5 years until we do another study. I would like to see us put out some kind of a timeline that at least address some of the issues we have so that we can see some progress. Thank you.
Yeah, so if I can just kind of address two things there, Councilmember Lowe and then also yourself, Councilmember Felder. The specific task at hand, beginning in 2017, was to address downtown parking, period. It came as an after act of the adoption of the circulation element, which are the things that Councilmember Lowe spoke about. So those are more circulation element things, whether it's Broadway, whether it's other streets and circulation issues around the city, widening roads, those kind of things, pedestrian, bicycles, things like that throughout the city. The task at hand, I think, is derivative from that circulation element policy and direction. And so that's why we focus very specifically on the geography that we've done. As it comes to this particular second study, if you will, admittedly, again, as we've said, it's an administrative draft. We wanted to get some early feedback from the council before we go into further deliberations with discussions with the state. And now we'll talk to the county. I'm not going to be a wet blanket on that idea, but we'll give it a shot because I like.
Anytime. I mean,
Well, yeah.
I'll text, our supervisor immediately if we need to do that. So.
Yeah, we're also looking for a CRV location as well, but that's another story for
Okay,
another
well, give
day.
me a list.
Okay, we've got a list. But the cool thing is that this second plan, Brian's put in there that we want to adopt a parking management plan. So we're doing a study, and as one of the recommendations is come up with a specific plan for how we're going to implement phases 1 or 2 after it's gone through the planning commission and back to your council.
Yes, please. Yeah. Yeah, if you anything, sure.
Our goal this evening is to just start getting direction, and we are ready to roll. We have draft parking amendments ready to go, looking at the parking district. Public Works has been looking into code enforcement. We've been looking into alternative transportation, getting skips of work. So there's a lot of work that has already been done. We just don't want to go too far down any roads until we have a plan that's been blessed by City Council and has had public input.
And to follow up on that, I just want to agree with what Councilmember Lowe and Councilmember Felder just said. I think it's really important that we come up with this plan. We do have alternatives, but then we come up with a plan, and then this council and future councils execute it. It'll probably take 3 to 5 years, but let's get that plan first, whether it's code amendments or bicycle parking or everything. Oftentimes we sort of do things piecemeal and then they get forgotten about, or a fire happens or a pandemic happens, and then we're back 5 years later starting over. And so let's just come up with that plan, and I think we're close. And I'm really excited about this. And quite frankly, Sonoma has needed a plan for downtown parking for decades. I mean, they talked about this in the 80s and the 90s, and it just has never happened. And I think it's time for our town to grow up. Most towns that are a world-class tourist destination have parking management plans in their downtown district, and we don't. And so I'm excited we're about to do it. I'm excited we're going to put this together. It's going to be, I think, beneficial for residents. I'm excited to hear about the new technologies that allow residents to sort of access the plaza in a way that maybe out-of-town guests won't. I mean, they will, but in different ways, as you understand. I think this will be better for the merchants, and I think it'll be better for our town's economic development potential. I mean, a lot of projects that are proposed in the Plaza downtown retail overlay district sometimes get caught up over parking issues because of lack of parking or parking codes and everything. So once we get this plan and that foundation established, I think it will be a win-win for our residents and our merchants and our visitors. And so I'm very excited about that, and just can't wait to get started. So thank you.
And I'd like to, just one thing in the plan that I know I've heard is controversial, and maybe it's not. Maybe sometimes people say something's controversial and maybe it's not. And that has to do with the signage. And in the last slide, the Folsom sign, personally, I don't have a problem with signage. I think signage is what people are looking for, right? And it's just to help them find it. But I wanted to throw it out there just to make sure Are we on, that was one of the things on there, are people okay with signage? Because I have heard from others that maybe previous councils had a problem with the sign because it wasn't pretty enough or Sonoma enough or whatever enough. Is that such a thing?
Oh, it's a thing. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm assume those will be details within a plan, but I mean, I assume any sign will be in that sort of Sonoma aesthetic. I mean,
If I can jump in on that and have Brian come up to the podium for a sec. In my looking through signage, obviously I saw the one in Folsom, for example, and others throughout the country. Those are usually aimed at structures. We don't have a structure per se, and maybe Brian can address that. But Brian, can you also educate me and the council at the same time? The parking management plan that we've been talking about in this administrative draft, does it come on the heels or concurrently with the adoption of the final draft? I mean, is that like the PMP, or I guess the parking management plan? How do they work together?
Well, yeah, I mean, ideally, the way we'd like to go about this is get firm direction from council about which options you want to pursue, which ones you don't, because every community is a little different in the way they approach this. So,
and if I can, that's not right tonight. That's when we come back through the cycle.
Yeah. I didn't mean to imply tonight. That's why we're going to come back again with more, like an ironed, fleshed out copy here. But the idea, I mean, my preferred approach here would be to get firm direction from council to say, yes, this is kind of the direction we want to head in, and we can have an implementation plan with it. I mean, we have a vested interest in making sure this thing succeeds, and so we want to have actual timeline and milestones associated with it where you can roll this out.
All right.
But can I actually, sorry, I hate to belabor the point, but I do want to address one of Councilman, one of your Councilmember Lowe's comments about the alternative modes. So one of the things I work in addition to parking is what we call transportation demand management. So it's essentially what you get at. It's essentially how do you promote alternative modes and incentivize people to use walking, biking, transit, things of that sort. And we're currently working on different plans here in Sonoma on different TDM plans. And one of the challenges we do run up against oftentimes, because I would love to be able to take a shuttle. One day there will be a dedicated shuttle from Pengrove all the way over to Sonoma just for me. But, I hear what you're saying. And oftentimes the challenge of that is being able to get sufficient funding, because a single project can't fund that sort of thing by itself. And so, which is why it's so critical and why we're looking at the parking benefit district and other mechanisms to be able to pool funding in a way to make these macro solutions more feasible. Because right now, if you try to do it on a development by development basis, it just doesn't pencil out. And it's a tough nut to crack. MTC has been working with their Vine service in Napa County to try to service different wineries and things of that sort. So I just want to acknowledge it and say it's absolutely on our minds.
How is a parking benefit district funded?
So, okay, so when we've talked about it, staff and I talked about this the other day too. There's the parking benefit district is generally funded through fees developed within that district. So you could be talking about meter fees. You could be talking about permit fees. You could be talking about in lieu parking fees that are in lieu parking fee when your actual development is paying a fee to get out of the parking requirement. And so or enforcement fees, any fees that are generated within that district, you can keep within it for any sort of improvements. And the idea is to keep those improvements flexible to serve the needs of the downtown or whatever the district is.
So it's a city special district? It's not like an assessment on
No,
Plaza
it's not,
property owners?
No, it's
Okay.
that's different.
That's different.
So then that's one of the distinctions we were talking about is the different options about being a parking benefit district versus something like a transportation impact fee versus playing with in lieu fees. These are all different levers you can pull on. They all have their pros and cons.
All right, that's great. Yes.
So I appreciate what you said earlier. Here in Sonoma, I sat on Sonoma County Transportation Authority many years ago, and I watched other cities get free shuttles. and the program was called Imagine. So I said, I imagine this coming to Sonoma, even though we're so beautiful, we don't have any problems. But guess what? We did get it. So, and it's been here a couple of years. Not just, it wasn't me that did it. It was everyone on the city council. We kept talking about it. So we imagined it and it did happen. So I, you know what? I can't give up hope because I think it's really important that we do hang on to the focus of getting the things that we want for this smaller city. So I'm happy about that.
All right, I think that right now, let me open to public. Any more inputs? Yes, please. Yes, definitely.
You guys talked a long time, so I got a list.
Yes.
So I want to know the number of spaces that are taken up by parklets at this point, just out of curiosity. I also want to know about the post office. Is the post office going to stay where they are forever? I noticed that they have to park their employees across at the Shell station now, and there's more and more post vans all the time, and that indicates to me that they're maybe reaching capacity. This talks to what Maria said. The buses come to the Casa Grande. The people scurry out of the buses and they scurry to the Plaza. They do not go to the Depot Park Museum, and I'm pretty sure most of them don't go to state parks. They're eating and shopping. I want to comment that there are more people parked in the Arnold Field parking lot because I see them. It used to be that there wasn't much parking there. There was a couple of people that would park in the city part of it. Now, oftentimes during the day, people from I believe, working in the plaza are parking there. So that's a positive thing. I wanted to ask about what about this parking out here as part of the options. It's pretty close to all the other places. And then the signage, don't forget the Sonoma Plaza is a national landmark. So when we do signage, we have to be considerate of that. That's it.
Thank you, Patricia. All right. Robert, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Your first name Robert, last name Frank, Larkin Drive, Sonoma. And it occurred to me that, overstressed parking is not unique to Sonoma. What is unique to Sonoma, though, is the utter absence of parking meters. I like parking meters. They're nostalgic. And if I put in a quarter for 15 minutes, it stimulates recycled use of the stall. If you have to commit, to an all-day, parking fee, then all of a sudden, do I really want to commit $20 or more dollars, for something I might only need for a half an hour? And also I wanted to address the gentleman there. The pent-up demand from the pandemic has run its course. That's why Clay Street is no longer a de facto parking lot for train town. I'm sorry?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, address the comments to the council, indeed.
Yeah.
So at any rate, the good consultant expressed parking concern from the standpoint of the user, also the business, so as not to constrain the top line or the bottom line of the business. Also safe and efficient. What is the percentile split down? If you had to split it down 4 ways into 4 cornerstones, how would can you assign percentiles to importance? Yeah. I can ask the question of them. Are you going to redirect the question to him?
No, right now you just make the comments. Yeah, we're on the listening.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
because today's this is so-called presentation. We just listen to share the information, understand each other, and try to get some new idea.
Very good.
From each party.
In that potpourri of variables that he shared on the TV screen, there was nothing mentioned about people who have the double luxury of double car garages, double car driveways, and double car detents along the curb. So when balancing the needs of out-of-town parkers versus residential parkers, that is a variable that is giving me a lot of heartburn lately. Because we do have, with 112 stalls, we down there have enough parking. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Any more public comments in this room? If not, Rebecca, how about Zoom?
No one's raising their hand.
All right, yeah, thank you. So again, and thank you so much, and Brian and Maria and staff. Yeah, that is wonderful, and the presentation, informational and also educational. That's wonderful, and I totally agree with everyone that say that we should have someday, something on the hand, the plan, time frame or a dollar amount. And for example, every time when we met our state representative, Senator Bill Dahl and Cecilia and Curry, we always mention about the Casa Grande parking. They always tell, well, passionate, of course, we will fully support. What are we can do? We can do, we can say nothing. So that if we really have a plan, or the proposal, for example, $10 million for 10 years, we needed to improve. And our target is states when they share 50%. Our local here, to save for 5 or 10 years, get another $5 million, do something. And then every time when we meet with the representative, of course, they are in our district, and the representative, this first time that they want to take care of us, and then they take care of the whole state. So I suggest that our staff and the consulting company try to find a 5 years plan or a 10 years plan, time frame, and with the dollar amount, and then we can always make amendments, and then we can talk in the state and talk with our local residents. Yes. Any more comments or? No more. Yeah, you already got a chance. Next topic. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, if I can just add,
Yes, sure.
I believe we do have a Casa Grande ad hoc, and at that point, right now what we're doing is talking staff to staff. We wanted to just kind of check in,
Sure.
make a presentation tonight. I think at the time when Maria and her staff and our staff get together working with our city manager, at a point when we come back to the planning commission through to the council after that, we'll have some pricing timelines. We may have a better understanding of how we can cooperate with the state and come back with a parking management plan which will address some of those things, and then we may need to go to the political assistance that you just talked about.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, and before we go to the next agenda item, yeah, we have 5 minutes of break. Thank you. Let's move forward. Agenda number 4, consent calendar. All items listed on consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. If anything we want to pull out? No. Do I need to open to the public? Okay, let me now open to public. Looks like a no. How about the Zoom? All right.
I move the consent calendar.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Barnett,
Aye.
Councilmember Agramonte,
Aye.
Councilmember Felder,
Aye.
Councilmember Lowe,
Aye.
Mayor Dean.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Agenda number 5, public hearing. Today we don't have any public hearing. Agenda number 6, regular calendar, City Council. 6.1, update on the Sonoma Valley Field of the Dream Deferred Maintenance contract. But, that is for Michael, right? Oh.
We can do this together.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Sue.
Mayor Ding and City Council members, so we just wanted to give you an update on the deferred maintenance contract for Sonoma Valley Field of Dreams. We've been talking with the Sonoma Valley Field of Dreams, and one of the things that we're kind of struggling with, and they were struggling with, is to do a maintenance contract. There's a lot of requirements, city requirements for large dollar projects. Maintenance projects. I've got a
Yeah, yes, I do the same thing.
a cough drop in my mouth.
I know how to do the Heimlich, in case.
Yeah, and just, I don't have a cough drop in my mouth. And let me just go ahead and, as Sue was saying, there's been a challenge with Field of Dreams. As council knows, we've discussed the deferred maintenance that has piled up in the past with the new board coming in. They've addressed assessing the deferred maintenance items that need to be taken care of. First and foremost is tree trimming. And what we discussed with Field of Dreams, since this was brought up last with council, is to take a look at the routine maintenance activities and try to keep with the same model that we currently have, which Field of Dreams has the bandwidth and the capability to manage those items. Then as far as the deferred maintenance goes, this gets into some 3-figure contractors coming in, some big contracts with a lot of insurance requirements, liability, indemnification, and they were a little apprehensive in doing that. We had a talk with them, we identified that, and what we decided was that Public Works would administer those contracts. So we're gonna work with Field of Dreams, get some quotes from tree trimming contractors that we're gonna be utilizing for the first phase of this, and we're gonna write the contracts for them. And that way, Public Works will work with Field of Dreams to manage the contractors. Mm-hmm. They're gonna assist us, and we'll work with them on that. And then we will be overall in charge of the contract and the funding. There will be no reason to transfer that money to Field of Dreams. It'll stay at the city, and we'll assist in that way. And there will be more items that we've been talking about, we haven't specifically identified yet. Yeah.
Great. All right, yeah.
Just going to say, I noticed we don't have any representatives from Field of Dreams here tonight, but I'm assuming from the staff report that they are in agreement that this is an acceptable path forward, at least for the time being. And I believe they will still intend to come back with a more descriptive plan for the future.
Yes,
Is that correct?
and they, actually, they were going to come back in September. They do have a master plan that they wanted to present to council, and they will have an updated pro forma for that. But both Mike and I have met with them, and
you know, their concerns were some of the things that they, you know, just as volunteers that they couldn't manage on these large maintenance contracts. So they were in agreement with us that this would be the easiest and best way for us to manage it.
Yeah, and this follows in council's recommendation last council meeting to come up with a 1-year agreement. And this fits right into that. And so what we're doing is we're identifying and working with Field of Dreams. And yes, they are in concurrence with our proposed model.
Thank you.
Do you anticipate the needs for the deferred maintenance to go above the $35,000 budgeted item that's noted in the staff report?
So the items could go above that. We did, last year we gave them $25,000 for deferred maintenance, and at the last meeting they said that they, you know, hadn't really had the opportunity to use those funds because, first of all, they don't, you know, it wasn't quite enough to cover some of those deferred maintenance items, and so we'll be working with them on that. So.
I don't think it will for this fiscal year because of the reserve that they currently have from last year.
Okay.
So I think that what we've allotted for this fiscal year, in addition to the money that wasn't spent yet last year, I don't think that it will.
Right, but if that did happen, or if there, you know, something came up and it was, you know, wow, this happened and we would come back to council at that point. So.
Okay. Do we need to? I think at that last meeting we approved the $35,000.
Yeah.
Do we need to rescind that, or?
I think really what we've just allotted that we will be spending $35,000 on the deferred maintenance for the Field
So we
of
just won't
Dreams.
send it to them. We'll
Right.
just tap it. Okay.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
So basically, right now, they do have the $60,000.
They don't have it yet. They don't have 60,000. They had.
Because last year's, they haven't spent it yet.
Right, so last year we gave them 25,000, which they have, you know, not spent on the deferred maintenance yet. And then we allotted them another, through council approval, 35,000 for this year, so.
Okay.
And, you know, it could be that there's other items that need to be identified, but, you know, we feel like we have sufficient funds to cover the.
That's great, yeah, to cover and, oh, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So, Mr. Berger, I think it sounds like you're helping them to be able to get to their goal, realize their responsibility for what they're doing, because I know that it's a treasured place. You know, I was listening to Mr. Peterson's obituary, and I think so many people, including the Stones, worked on this for many years. So I'm sure with your mentoring, they'll actually understand their responsibility and how they're supposed to keep up with that.
Yeah, in defense of the current board, my understanding is they came in, they're the ones that are looking into and addressing these deferred maintenance activities, and so they're to be commended for that. And then also, they're really dialed in on the routine maintenance activities. It's taking on these contracts on the deferred maintenance that gets just, it's if you don't administer these types of contracts all the time, it gets a little bit tricky, and their organization is more of the facilitator. Yeah. And they can reach out and find these different contractors for us to use, and that's a perfect service for us to work with them and get these jobs done. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks.
And the current board members, Marty, I run by there a lot, and he's, you know, quite often out in the field. So they, you know, as volunteers, they definitely are out there doing the work. They're doing the, you know, the smaller maintenance and you know, keeping the fields up so that, you know, for rentals and whatever. So, but they're definitely very committed to this. So.
That's great, yeah. They did a lot of our staff's work, yes, see the city's work. Great. Any more questions? Okay. Let me open to public if any comments. No? How about the Zoom? No? All right. Yeah. Let's come back to council and also, do we need to make a motion or just information item? Last time we already
it was just information. You already
all
at
right.
the last meeting.
Let's move to agenda number 6.2, discussion, consideration, and a possible action to adopt a resolution amending the Recreation and Community Service Program funding and the policy guidelines.
That was a mouthful.
Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor Ding and City Council members. I'm here tonight to cover the updates to the Recreation and Community Service Policy Funding and Guidelines. The city has a long history of funding organizations who provide recreation and community services to our community. The city has made the decision in the late 1980s to financially support entities who have the expertise, the staff, and the reputation for delivering recreation programming here in Sonoma. Over the years, the policy has been modified, with the most recent modifications occurring in 2018, when the formal process was outlined, which included a funding mechanism, terms of contracts, and a list of the local organizations was also identified as part of that policy and those guidelines. The goal with the creation of the 2018 policy was to move away from the annual grant process that we had found ourselves in and provide some stability to those core organizations who consistently support our community through their programming efforts. This way, they would have the ability to better plan and budget into the future. The purpose of the Recreation Community Service Program is to centralize and bring together the many investments that the city provides. This updated program has the following 5 components. It includes the multi-year contracts with our key nonprofit core recreation and service providers. I wanted to make sure I got the word core in there because it often comes up in discussions. 2, it talked about the fee waivers and financial support for events that celebrate our community's heritage and history. 3, the fee waivers for community events that celebrate the seasonal events and brings our community together. And 4, the discretionary funding to support those unique programs and projects that are impactful to our community, and that is part of the discretionary funding that is the 10% that City Council has discretion to program throughout the year. And 5, enhancements of the Recreation and Community Services webpage on the city's website to provide information and links regarding this program, our partners, and the city's investment. Over the years, the city has identified the 4 core partners who receive benefits in the amount of $25,000 to $55,000 annually. Those organizations are the Boys and Girls Club of Sonoma Valley, Sonoma Community Center, Vintage House, and the Sonoma Ecology Center. The city has contributed over $3.9 million to those organizations over the past 40 years and has provided almost an additional $1 million in discretionary funding to other organizations over the same period. Outside of the core 4 providers, these funding numbers do not take into consideration the rental subsidies that the city provides to other local nonprofits who are providing services to our community. The formal funding process occurs during the annual budgeting process, and the policy provides the guidelines on who receives the funding and provides City Council discretionary budget to fund organizations and other projects that serve the community. During the budgeting discussion, the community services budget is approved, and the city staff is given direction during the time of budget to move forward with those contracts. During the June 21st council meeting, Council directed staff to bring revised recreation and community service program funding and policy back with changes which would include criteria for other community recreation and community service providers to be added as core recreation and community services providers. Exhibit A, which is attached, is a red line version of the Recreation and Community Services Program funding and policy guidelines adopted on March 5th of 2018. Which includes staff recommended revisions. I'd like to pause here and acknowledge an error in my redlining of the policy. I accidentally redlined the paragraph on page 3 under other recreation and community service partnerships, and I eliminated the Field of Dreams. So I want to make sure that it was not my intention. But I want to make sure that if you do adopt the policy tonight, that that paragraph or those words are added back into the policy because it's not there currently. And I have pulled them out, and I can read them to you at a later moment when you do make a decision. Exhibit B is the clean version of the proposed policy. Staff has also updated the policy to reflect changes that were recently made to the special events policy, as well as changes to a few of the heritage and community event organizations. The goal in creating the following criteria was to find commonalities between the existing core providers and to ensure accessibility to the programming, facilities that they provide. The following outlines the criteria to qualify as a core recreational partner and community service provider. 1, must be an established 501c3 organization in good standing. 2, provide recreation and community services programming that serves a minimum of 5% of the total population of the city of Sonoma. 3, the hours of operation and programming exceed 30+ hours a week. And 4, must maintain a community facility and ensure its accessibility to the public year-round. The policy goes on to outline a process for which City Council could elevate additional nonprofits to the higher tier, ensuring the stability of the funding for a 3-year period. Staff is recommending during the annual fiscal year budget process that City Council can consider adding additional key nonprofits for their delivery of core recreation and community services on behalf of the city. It is important to note as the total amount of funding that is available for recreation and community service partners varies from year to year because it's based on tax revenue, which varies year to year, and that by adding additional core recreation and community service partners, it could potentially reduce the amount of funding that goes out to the other core partners because you have a limited budget, unless you decide that you want to change the funding mechanism. The City Council may decide to create a formal policy on parameters about the discretionary funding in the future. Any non-programming funding from the core recreation and community service funding that isn't programmed shall roll to council discretionary use. Currently for fiscal year 22-23, council discretionary funding balance is at $27,185. If the City Council decides to add an additional core provider, for the Recreation and Community Service Program for fiscal year 22-23, a mid-year budget adjustment could be needed because we've done it now after budget. And any additional funding to a potential new core provider would come from the fiscal year unallocated funding of that 90% of the total funding, in which you have a balance of about $50,000. It's $48,667. So with that, I will conclude my report, but I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much. Questions?
Well, before I was on the city council, it was interesting to listen to these big three. I think a big 3 or big 4.
Well, it was big 3, and
Right,
then
big
we've
3.
added Sonoma Ecology Center
Right,
recently.
and they were, and it was interesting because it started to be a little bit of jockeying, good organizations, but at that time there was a council member that said, we can't have a recreation program. We couldn't do the work that they do with that cost. They're much less expensive than us. That's one of the reasons I think this council or a council looked at doing this, and it evolved into what it is today, further than what it used to be. It actually answers some of the community issues that we see. And the other thing is, we reach outside of the city of Sonoma, which I think is important for everyone here who's listening to know. We don't just do this within the parameters of Sonoma, but that's how I remember it before I was on the city council, and I think it's starting to make a lot more sense as we go along, because there are needs that were met in the beginning because it was the big 3. Nothing wrong with them. I was actually on the community center. I was the president of the board at that time, and so I really appreciated our prowess. But it's important that, everybody's at the table. So I appreciate your report. I think it really explains a lot. Thank you for taking the time.
It's wonderful.
I have a few questions,
Sure.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
So this document just sort of provides the parameters for this program going forward, but in our next year's budget, for example, we could modify the funding per provider. Like, for example, I've never understood, and I know there probably was a reason, I just wasn't on the council at the time, why the Boys and Girls Club gets $55,000, for example, and the Ecology Center gets 25, and the others get 40. Like, is that a discussion to be had during the budget process, or now?
So I would like to defer to Sue on this. We do have 3-year contracts with the Core 4. They go through, I believe it's fiscal year 23, 24.
Okay, so
So at that point, I think then you're able to, Sue, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think you'd have more flexibility to kind of go back and renegotiate dollar amounts.
And I think originally that was, it was based on historical funding, and probably based on the number, or what the council felt that the number of citizens or, participants that they were serving. So what happened in 2021 is, of course, we didn't have enough budget, so we had to reduce everybody's funding, but we did get them back up to the 2019-20 levels, and we've stayed with that 19-20 level. So, but that's when the 3-year contracts were done was it last fiscal year? Yes, right. And so, but it's open for discussion, and it would certainly, one of the things that we're also putting in into the contracts, and that we'll be requiring of all of our partners, if they come back to council and they talk about what they've used the funding for, and we look at their financials. I mean, there's a lot more information that I think we could get from our partners and that they could provide us, so that we know what our funding is really being used for. So.
I'm sorry.
You're
To
right.
actually understand the outcomes, just to give the money is one thing. We need to know that the taxpayers' money is actually being used in the way it was intended. So I think what you're saying, Vice Mayor, is important, because we need to know it's not just another $10 or $20 or $30,000. Would you show us the results? It's really important. So I appreciate. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. I have another question. How about all the grants? We already budgeted, or we still waiting for application for the grants?
From the groups?
No, grants. Because in here we have a community grants.
This policy replaced your community grant program.
Okay. So that means what are we and
I think there's a column that says community grants.
community.
It's my understanding that is that discretionary funding that, as one example in the past was like the Sonoma Valley Museum of Art would come forward and ask for funding to help support the outdoor art that they would place in the plaza, and so they would come to City Council and request funding to help support that initiative, and then based on council's direction, that discretionary funding, Mayor Ding, would come out of the community's funding program.
Yes. So I remember last year we got approved and 15,000 for food for all. This money came from this the grant, right?
That came from the discretionary funding.
Yes, your discretionary budget.
Yeah.
Also
the 10%.
10%.
Yes.
Okay. And another question is from the fiscal year 2022 to 2023, that is total amount is 207,000. That is based on our projected, or
it's projected.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if on the revenue, on the tax, we can collect more, and so this amount could be proportionally increased as well.
If it's more, we don't go back and provide more funding. If it's less, we do have the ability, say if there was, catastrophe or something where we didn't get the revenue that we had projected, we can always go back to the partners and say, the funding is less, but we have never gone back and given them more if we have more revenue at the end of the year. Because it's really at the end of the year when you know how much revenue.
Okay. It's possible for this kind of money and applying it to next year, or because this year we have the additional one, so that means the next year we can do the additional fund.
Well, you could, normally what happens with any surplus is it just, it goes back into the general fund. Yeah.
So I think initially that was not the intention. It's to
There
fund
would
what
be-
they've proposed.
Right, right. And then every year, of course, the council has discretion to fund each of the organizations. And I think when they're, definitely when their contracts come up and we know what they're using the funding for and, how many participants and the type of, but I mean, I do want to make one comment, and you said it, is I've worked in cities where they have parks and recreation departments. Way more. You spend way more on parks and recreation departments, and it kind of, the way the city's doing it right now, it's rather brilliant because we have partners who are providing many, many community services for us. So it's
wonderful. And,
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Just on the subject of parks and recreation, and I agree with all that has been said, but the school district provides a lot of that as well. I mean, the fields and so forth, there's a lot of cities that have, we have Field of Dreams or whatever, but there's a lot that goes on with the schools that they take up a lot of the programs as well. So I just want to put in a pitch to continue our ongoing relationship with
Right.
the
And we have
with
the
the school
pool.
district.
Yeah,
And the
and the
pool
pool that
coming
we are
up,
funding,
which
yeah,
I'm
for
so
scholarships,
excited
but,
about. I
yeah.
can't stand it. Yes, I'm very excited about the pool. It's very important, and we need to fill it with water as soon as possible.
Yes, they are approved to fill with water. So.
Thank you.
Do we have contracts with the heritage festivals or heritage events?
We don't have contracts. What I work off are the fee waivers that have been approved based on this policy.
So if a certain heritage event was going in a different direction than has historically been in Sonoma, we would have leverage there, potentially?
I think it would need to be discussed.
Would
That's-
that have to be modified or edited in this document, or?
Wow, Sue.
Well, I mean, I think in this policy document that they are identified as a heritage event and
Right.
that we do, but again, you can change the policy at,
Whenever.
whenever. So it's,
Meaning, since they don't have contracts, that can always be modified whenever.
right. It's just, they're just identified as a heritage event.
So what was happening prior to 2018 is I'd get a request when I was doing an event. If it was the Native Sons, for example, they would ask for a fee waiver, and it felt like we were always coming to City Council to ask for the one-off fee waivers. So what we tried to do was make it a clearer process and eliminate some of that staff work that goes into preparing all the documentation to bring everything to City Council. And so this gives us that direction. If you wanted to change it, we're here to take direction.
I mean, I don't see a need to change it right now. I just wanted to make sure that flexibility existed for the future.
I mean, it states heritage event. I think if the heritage is not part of the event, then you have some leverage.
And then my final question is an interesting one. Is there anything in here about, like, for example, the Sonoma Ecology Center has a new, like, an organization has formed over the last few years that's part of the Sonoma Ecology Center called the Sonoma Valley Collaborative.
Yes.
That is, in my view, doing a lot of good work in terms of providing a lot of information with a focus on housing policy, but it is a policy-oriented organization that lobbies the Planning Commission and City Council for their point of view on housing policy, which is up for debate.
Because as a 501c3, they're not supposed, are they a 501c3?
They're probably a C4 if they're doing that, no?
Well, I mean, I just know it always says it's a project of the Sonoma Ecology Center, Sonoma Valley Collaborative. So I don't know the details on that, but I think it's a little odd that we're funding an organization that has another organization that actively politically lobbies us for good reason. I mean, that's totally their right, but do you understand what I'm saying? And so...
Yes, I didn't realize that was part of the
Uh-huh.
discussion. So if there's direction that something needs to be clarified.
There's a lot of organizations, though, that do that have, do direct access for people, and then also have a separate branch that does advocacy work. I mean, like the Sierra Club, I mean, since we're talking about the environment, I mean, there's a lot of different organizations that have several layers to them. Some have C3, C4s, and federal PACs for that matter. I mean, that do that. So I think that the fact that they're successful enough that they've branched out shouldn't limit our, but certainly we could talk about it. But I kind of see those as really separate organizations.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
oh, sorry, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
sure.
So the only thing I'm concerned about is, I know I'm going down below earth tonight, is the horrible job I think they do on their properties on East MacArthur. I've talked about this for years. That's the one thing that I believe we contract for. And I don't see the outcomes as being wonderful. I think they've expanded throughout whatever they do, Sustainable Sonoma. They've done all of this, which is admirable. I still don't see if they stay within that 501c3 parameter. But my concern is do the job you're supposed to do on East MacArthur.
Is that a maintenance contract?
Poor,
Are you talking about like the Nathanson Creek Park or
Yes.
that lot next to
Yes.
the truck and auto? Yeah.
That, Madeline, that might fall under a different contract than what we do as part of the core recreation. I'd have to
Possibly.
look into that and get back to you.
Yeah,
According
yes,
to-
any maintenance contracts fall out of this. They're in a different, and we can. I
because
can
I
see
guess
Mike's writing it
I'm
down.
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Through the mayor, that to me brings out the point that we should have the input year by year from the various groups that are receiving the money, so that if the Ecology Center has to explain how they're spending the money we're giving them, we have an idea whether they're using it in the way we think is appropriate or if they're going beyond the bounds.
Yes.
So I as I was looking at just putting together those criteria, those 4 bullet points, one of the things I did do was look back at some of the past reports. And in my mind, some of the programming that Sonoma Ecology Center does is really through our K through 6th grade classes. They do a lot of science education. And so in my mind, that's what we would be paying them for as part of this policy and these guidelines. And the maintenance stuff would be kind of separate. And the other point that Kelso made is noted. And if there was direction, then we could address that.
I'm happy to approve this tonight, and I think the Sonoma Ecology Center does great work, especially as you noted for youth. But I think it's an issue that can be discussed in the future. Like, for example, like this organization, they assemble people to come out to support or oppose housing projects, which is totally their right. But, that just seems a little, I think it's worth a discussion. And maybe that can just be a new separate organization, completely separate.
Yes. At this point, I would like to, ask the city attorney, David and Sue work together and do some of the research for those kind of the grant receiver, what the kind of status, 501c3 or 501c4, and they have the different treatment as the donor and out in the city, how to become the compliant. So that is, I think, is important. Yeah.
With the contract.
Yeah, with a contract, and also just like last time, and the Field of the Dream. We just help them. We are fully support you, but we have the issues. We find out a website. We didn't see your name, and then later on, that Marty, did work on this. They just spend less than 1 week. They fix the issue, and then to be compliant. That's wonderful. Yeah. And also, it's not good for those other donors, private donors. For sure, they are in a good status and compliant.
So, Mayor Ding, that is part of the criteria that we did. It was the first bullet point on the criteria that we added.
Yes.
That they had to be in good standing. So,
Yeah.
and that is definitely part of the report. Report back to City Council is that would also be investigated to make sure they're in compliance.
And I actually did, Mayor Ding and council members, I did, after watching that meeting, and, you know, I did go, because I had also checked
Yes.
on Field of Dreams, but I did go out to all the other,
Okay, other organizations.
right, and they're all in
Wonderful.
good standing. You can pull up their reports, so they all are in good standing, so.
So I think that what Vice Mayor has brought up, though, is the question, they may have a 501c4 for whatever else they're doing, Sustainable Sonoma, and they may not, and they may have something else for whatever, the
Right.
housing thing.
Yeah.
But, so that's,
Yeah, and I think that's very important that they come back and report on what the actual funding from the city, because it goes to Sonoma Ecology Center, so to know what the funding was used for, and I think in an annual report that they would provide that information. And then also on the maintenance contracts, we're gonna be, you know, monitoring those, for any money we provide for maintenance, we're gonna be monitoring that and making sure that the maintenance that they say they are doing with the funding is completed, so.
Awesome. If any more questions? If
I mean,
not-
just the last one,
Yeah.
the city
Sure.
recognition. Is there any like policy? I mean, I know it's in here, but are they required to use our logo on their website and their materials? Like, do we encourage? I mean, like, because I just checked all their websites and I don't see our logo, and so
They are supposed to have our logo listed as a sponsor.
oh, just like somewhere,
Yes.
not like
not
doesn't have to be
necessarily on our
prominent.
homepage.
Okay,
Correct.
Okay. All right, if no more questions, I would like to open to public. See any inputs, any questions? It looks like no. How about on the Zoom? No? All right. Yes, let's bring to the owner council. I think we need to have the motion, right? We need to have the motion.
I move approval.
Who second?
second?
Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Barnett,
Aye.
Councilmember Agramonte,
Aye.
Councilmember Felder,
Aye.
Councilmember Lowe,
Aye.
Mayor Dean.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Agenda number 6.3, discussion, consideration, and a possible action on the selection process of the executive recruiting the firm for the city manager recruitment, including contract authorizing.
Mayor Ding and city council members, city managers are hired by and serve at the pleasure of the elected city council. City manager oversees the entire city on a daily basis and is responsible for hiring staff, monitoring the annual budget, and driving forward the city council's goals, projects, and initiatives. The selection of a city manager is one of the most important decisions the city council makes. So the city of Sonoma has been through a number of city managers in the last 2 years. A continual change in chief operating officers for any organization is extremely hard on staff members and makes it difficult to drive long-term projects and goals forward. On February 16th, I was appointed acting city manager following the departure of the then city manager. And this appointment came after having served as the assistant city manager for the city of Sonoma for over 5 years. My experience also includes another 15 plus years in executive and management roles for other cities and public agencies. So on May 18th, I was appointed as interim city manager to fill the role and perform all the duties outlined previously until a recruitment for a new city manager could be completed. With direction from City Council on May 17th, staff sent a request for proposal, which is attachment A to the staff report for the city manager recruitment for the following, and we just sent them out to the following executive recruitment firms with the June 15th, 2022 deadline for responses. So it went out to Avery and Associates, Peckham and McKinney, Ralph Anderson and Associates, Terry Black and Company, and WBPC. The city did receive three responses to the RFP, and they're attached as attachment B, and the total RFP responses are there. We received responses from Avery and Associates, Ralph Anderson and Associates, and WBPC. So although cost is a factor, the selection of a recruitment firm should not be cost-based. Rather, it should be determined on the overall competency and talents of the firm. So I did complete reference checks on all of the firms, plus I've worked previously with all the respondents, and they are all highly qualified. As City Council is anxious to get the recruitment process underway, I am recommending that the council choose WBPC for the city manager recruitment, and that's based on the following. WBPC BPC recently very successfully recruited the city's Public Works Director, Mike Berger, and the staff and stakeholders were extremely impressed with the professional and thorough recruitment process for the Public Works Director. WCBP has excellent comprehensive reviews from other agencies. 62% of their applicants and 56% of their candidates placed in leadership positions come from diverse backgrounds. And they have recently successfully placed city managers and for the city of Santa Rosa, town of Truckee, city of Petaluma, city of Pasadena, and city of Ceres. So staff is recommending the following 3 options for the selection of an executive recruiting firm for the city manager. If council is in agreement with the city's manager's recommendation, provide authorization for the city manager to enter into a contract with WCBP for the city manager recruitment process, or you can discuss and consider merits of the 3 RFP responses this evening and choose an executive recruiting firm based on council's majority, and then provide direction to the city manager to enter into a contract with the chosen firm. Or you can direct staff to arrange an interview with each of the executive recruiting firms who responded to the city's RFP at the next regular council meeting on August 17th, 2022. So a little bit about the financial aspects. The RFP respondents provided a not to exceed amount of $27,800 to $36,800 for the recruitment process. The cost for the recruitment will depend on the final scope to be undertaken by the recruiter as directed by the City Council. For fiscal year 22-23, we budgeted $30,000 for the city manager recruitment. If needed, the final amount of the contract can be approved via budget amendment as part of the mid-year process. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions?
Other than I think that, I'm sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor, but I think there is experience with WBPC.
Wendy Brown is what the
Right, so, and it sounds like it would seem to be palatable for what we are looking for, but, so, I mean, I'm happy. For me, I don't want to go through another, although it's just me. I'm sorry.
I concur with the city council member Agramonte on this. It seems like, I mean, I know a little bit about some of the other candidates that were placed in these other cities, and the fact that they've been very happy with the services provided, and I don't think there's any reason to delay, and I would support entering into a contract with them.
I have another, the question that is a suggestion, and for this company, of course, I support, this and the company. If not possible, and I know that each company, they have their inventory, they have the pool, and maybe they can consider and do some advertisement to reach and the local people, for example, our community.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they absolutely will.
Yes, and then in this way, we can get a more chance to locate the best candidate we need.
Right, and certainly, I mean, whatever firm you select, they will meet with City Council to, direction and how you want to handle the process, and do you want to have outside stakeholders? Do you want to have staff be, part of the process? So that would all be determined, but they would certainly be reaching out to local candidates. Candidates everywhere, so that we'd have the best one. So, yeah.
How much was the search for the Public Works Director?
It was $24,000.
Plus, not to exceed, or total?
That was total. Yeah.
So why is it so much more expensive if it's a similar process?
I think because it's a higher level of recruitment, and I think that. And there's negotiation. If, you know, you can always go back to a firm, decide, you know, if you decide on one firm, you can always go back to them and say, you know, this is, you know, what our budget is, you know, would you be interested in coming in under our budget, so.
And not to put words in your mouth to answer that question, but I would imagine for a city manager, there's a lot more process involved. I mean, we weren't involved in, you know, necessarily in the, you know, there wasn't like a meeting where we talked about who we thought, you know, the attributes of the planning manager or whatever, you know, but with the city manager, you might have a community meeting that you want to put together. You know, there's all these, you know, there's just so many different layers to it. And I would imagine, I'm kind of surprised that it's not even more than that. Having gone through superintendent searches and so forth, they're quite intense, so.
All right. Councilmember Felder, do you have any?
I certainly don't see any reason to delay the process. I fully support the city manager's recommendation.
All right, let me open to public. See any comments? Looks none. How about on Zoom? No. All right, yeah, let's bring to our council and any more questions or we make it a motion.
I would like to say move to approve.
Who second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Excuse me, Mayor, we had three options. Which one did we move to approve?
Oh, yes. Yeah, WBC. Yes, great. Yeah, always. Yeah, no, we.
Option one,
Yeah,
yes.
option one. Mhm. All right, roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Barnett,
Aye.
Councilmember Agramonte,
Aye.
Councilmember Felder,
Aye.
Councilmember Lowe,
Aye.
Mayor Dean.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Let's move to next agenda. Agenda number 7, council members' report and the comments. Any in the meetings? Yes. Okay.
We had a meeting of Sonoma Clean Power at the beginning of July. And just to briefly, there's a SB 122 Senate bill is an energy bill that contains an order to build more fossil fuel power plants. And so thankfully, Sonoma Clean Power is advocating for a way to amend that bill so that we don't go off on that direction unfettered.
That's great. Any in the meeting? Yes, correct.
I attended Zero Waste and met today at a Sonoma site for a CRV location. Just took a look at it and, you know, was pretty pleased with it. Of course, it's up to the council, city manager, and everyone here just to be aware of it. I visited a site in Sevastopol, the CRV place in Sevastopol, which was great. You know, it was wonderful. Great. It's not huge. It just does what it's supposed to do. And so I was pleased about that.
Councilmember Rowe? Okay.
No, I
Yeah.
didn't.
I did have a couple of the meeting. The first one also is important. Last Monday, and July the 25th, that is the very important day for our Sonoma Valley groundwater standardability and the agency. And we got approved groundwater fee ordinance. That is historic. Yes, starting from the right now, you know, whoever uses the groundwater, you will be charged. And also that is exactly being compliant with the Groundwater Sustainability Management Act that is the created or approved by the state 2014. And during this preparation, because this kind of vote, and some part of the board members, they have different concern, and they concerned about the agricultural section, the winery owners, and the Lunan resident people, and they got some, you know, subsidized from the county, and also significant amount, 1.5. That is, I really don't like it. So now I challenge it because I said, if you want to, subsidize, you should subsidize all, especially for those kind of the low income, fixed income. For example, they lived in the, Springs, lived in the Seven Flag, Tamarack. They don't have any, the ways, leverage to be against this additional assessment. So but, when I consider our city's interest, our city's very, very few, just only 5%, 10% of people will be affected. They have the wills within the outer city. So I want to, move forward. I want to move. So now at the beginning, I said no. I will not vote yes or no until you should have some low income people's waiver or something like that. And then the chair Gorin and promise is that the next meeting we will discuss. So under this kind of situation, I voted yes. Yeah, because this ordinance needed to be in a supermajority. 6 members needed to 5, and our Valley over the Moon Water District, and they voted no. Yeah, also with the same consideration. But anyway, because our city situation is different. Very few people got affected, but we pay $25,000 for membership fee. So we should have our voice and also try to be, fair to everyone after we start this fee policy. Yeah. That is my report. Anything else? If no, that is the agenda number 8, city manager comments and announcements.
Mayor Ding and City Council members, so we wanted to give you an update on the housing element. The city's 6th cycle draft housing element is scheduled to be released to the public for its review and comment this next Monday, August 8th. And we ask that community members, residents, and anyone with housing interests in the city read the draft housing element and provide written comments to city staff. That would be Wendy Atkins by September 7th by 5 p.m. And the link to the draft housing element will be posted on the city's website. And for questions regarding the housing element, members of the public can contact Wendy Atkins by email or by phone. And at this time, staff has tentatively scheduled a hearing on the draft of the Planning Commission meeting on August 18th, and it intends to send the draft to the State Department of Housing and Community Development in October. After incorporating revisions from the HCD, the draft element will be presented to City Council for adoption, and that's tentatively set for January 2023, and then again sent to HCD for certification in late January 2023. Any questions about that? You can ask David Storr. Oh.
We are the passing pets.
And then one more thing, I did want to, well, actually, we have one other thing from Rebecca Barr, City Clerk, but so the meeting on the 7th, there are some conflicts. The League of California Cities conference starts on that date. Mayor Ding will be attending. Actually, Rebecca Barr will not be here. She has another engagement. We do have backup for that, but I think there's another council person that may not be here.
Yeah.
And so we were wondering if we wanted to change the date of that meeting.
Yes.
Okay, and do we have some?
And this is for what? I'm sorry.
September 7th.
September 7th.
September 7th.
And it's
Yes.
the recruit?
It's just it's a regular council meeting
Oh.
on
Regular
that
council
day,
meeting.
and so because Mayor Ding and Councilmember Lowe will not be there in attendance, do we want to change the date of that meeting?
Okay.
How about Tuesday or?
Tuesday the 6th? No?
Oh,
That
no?
will-
I can't, I'm out of town.
Okay.
Yes, yeah,
Out of
you
town.
leave on the 6th, so.
Is it possible to move it to the next Wednesday? Is that bad with 2 back-to-back in a?
For-
The,
Or
oh
could
yeah,
we-
there is an
Yeah.
extra week in,
Yeah, we could do the 14th and 28th.
I was thinking the August 31st.
Pushes you the same.
Oh,
way
back
against
up.
the next month.
Yeah,
Oh,
next
yeah.
month.
yeah, so that would be, so for September, we could do, oh,
Is,
Monday the 12th.
is it possible we skip this meeting or?
you can do
By-
that, you can vote to that as well, so it's up to you.
Okay.
The only thing that we'll miss then is the Sonoma Celebrates,
Mhm.
Roger Rotan,
Yeah.
but I mean,
What
we,
other date are we looking
we
at?
could do that, we
Right
could
now,
do that
like
after
14.
the celebration, I mean, after
If
his,
we're on the
We
14th,
could.
and then we
Yeah.
need to push,
yeah.
you know, to the 28th.
I mean, the thing is, we want to, during the celebration, make reference to the fact that the city council has done something, but,
Which is on the 7th?
it's on the 17th.
Oh, 17th, okay.
Yeah, so everybody buy a ticket to the
That-
Spastiani
that's
Theater.
the,
for that.
right, yeah, so that's the roast that you
That's
were-
the roast.
Yes, and-
Or I'm gonna make an unbelievable fool of myself. You won't want to miss it.
So you could vote to just do a meeting on the 21st, it's up to you. Is there anything that council, that we would do? Like an
21st.
ordinance adoption or anything that we would miss? No?
How do you think?
I mean, I would, well, I mean, I don't know what else is gonna be. I mean, I
Council-
would prefer to have a meeting.
Yeah. Council
We're-
Felder.
We're looking at
How
the
about-
17th?
How about Monday the 12th? It
Yeah.
spreads it out a little bit.
Yeah.
That
Well,
would-
it's
that would-
for
That
me,
works
I,
for me.
that'll,
That works for me.
yeah. How about,
Okay,
how about Rebecca? Monday, 12? Oh, okay.
9/12 and then,
Yeah, September.
and then
12.
9/21, the
Yeah.
regular meeting.
Spreads the meeting apart a little.
Yeah.
And then 9/21. 9/20.
Okay,
That's good.
so you need to make a vote on that, okay? They have to vote, do they have to vote? No?
We'll bring a resolution back.
Consent next.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
bring a resolution
okay.
back to schedule
Okay.
the meeting.
All right. And then
I'll look at the calendar. What
Rebecca
the heck
has
is this?
an announcement about the commissions that we're advertising for.
Yeah, we currently
Yes.
open, the pros and the Climate Action Commission are both open. We were able to get those open last week as soon as we were able to make some changes to the Civic Web Portal. They are open. At this time, we've only received 2 applications. So we've been doing advertising. We put out a press release. We've been in social media, in our e-newsletter. So if I'll put out a invite right now to anyone who's listening, please, if you're interested, please check into that. Also, as council members, you will have direct appointments on those commissions. So if there's someone that you're interested, please reach out to them. One thing to remember, that one of the things that was brought up in public comment was youth engagement. Each of those commissions does have a youth member, a non-voting youth member. So I just want to put a plug in for individuals to participate. And that does close on the 12th next week in order to get it. And we can extend that if you like, because the idea was so that you can make those appointments at the first meeting in September.
So the 12th, no?
So the
Yeah.
12th is the deadline. We could extend that a few days and still get those in the packet now that you've extended the meeting, but it's not that much of a change, so. Thank you.
Great, yeah, thank you. So anything else?
No, that's it.
No? All right, agenda number 9, city attorney comments.
I have no report. Thank you.
All right,
Anything?
agenda number 10, meeting is adjourned. Happy the city party tomorrow, I will not be here.